24. I'm one of your hosts, soon hopefully to be not the only host today, Lauren Gray. We have an amazing list of things to talk about today. One of our compatriots in crime, Mr. Robert Cole, who is a worker of Focusrite, among other prestigious organizations like JD Power and so forth. He'll name drop as soon as he gets here. Give us a great list of topics today. It's actually going to be hard to fit most of this stuff in. And if I'm by myself, I'll probably do it because I'll just breeze right through them. But I hope as I get other co-hosts joining me that we will dialogue a little bit about the amazing content that he gave us today. I'm making sure that we are simulcasting on everything. So we should be live and doing well for everything. All right. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So if you're seeing us on LinkedIn as well, if you'd like to join the show live, you can go to bit.ly/HTM show 224, and then you'll join our audience here on the chat that we have. And then if you want to join, if we have an empty seat, which right now we have 5 empty seats, then you can do so, or you can just get dialogue with us in the chat. I will try to keep an eye out for our chat respondents on all of our other platforms as well as we go along through this. So some of the great topics that Robert has given us, one of his headliners today was, of course, the Focusrite conference. And the one thing about Focusrite, for those who may have ever not attended it, it is a who's who. Literally, you can rub shoulders with all the leaders of the industries. But as Robert points out, ironically, airlines and such, they don't tend to represent very well rental car companies and so forth. But it's a great tech one. A lot of new and emerging technologies come out of there. Most every major tech platform that we use today goes there to parade their wares, so to speak, to get into a contest to make sure that they provide themselves the opportunity to expose their product to the industry leaders. And it's a great thing for that. But one thing that they do that is really remarkably great is if you can't attend, hello.
Hi.
I'm Miss Lily Mockman. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for the company. I was beginning to talk to myself. I said, I says. Actually, I was giving Robert a compliment. The list he sent out was very robust. There's great topics on every subject line. It's going to be hard to kind of hit all of them. I was just referring to the Focusrite. One of the great things that they do about Focusrite is that if you can't attend, because it's wickedly expensive, it's I think $4,700 to attend. But that's mainly for networking capabilities, because you really do get to sit side by side with some all the industry leaders. But what they do nicely is that they take all of their content and live stream it for free. So it gives you a great chance to really watch what's being done in the sense of emerging technologies and open dialogues. Robert is a employee of Focusrite. He's a producer and data analyst and so forth. And he actually gets to interview a lot of these people and go through a lot of the content selections and so forth. And he made some great recommendations. We'll leave those in the show notes as to which videos that he would recommend to watch first compared to the others. And some of the great highlights he puts. He sends out a list of that we're referring to the digital, it's no longer the digital marketing board, it's the marketing board of HSMAI. And he, in that context of the letter that he sends out, made some interesting comments about some of the highlighted statements that some people made, some of the tit-for-tat comments and so forth of industry leaders talking about each other. I thought the one between the founder of Oyo and TripAdvisor was an interesting dig. But like I said, those will be in the show notes. We'll make sure that they're there. But with that being said, some of the other topics I thought were really impressive on all of this. It's like almost picking out of a hat. All of them are the same. I want to get to the one about checking in, checking out anytime, because Lily, you being the revenue management specialist of our Happy Eclectic group, I'd love to see your insights as to what you feel is the pros and cons of according to the article, a trend development of people being able to leverage their arrival and departure times associated with a hotel, whether to monetize it or not. So love to hit that one. Love to talk about the connected trip, which is the magical unicorn idea that we can put all the dots together now between hotel reservations, flight reservations, recancellations and rebookings, check-ins, travel transportations to places, all seamlessly done for us without us having to go through the arduous process of connecting the dots ourselves. So that'll be kind of fun to be able to hit that one as well. And then the other revenue management one, which I think will be interesting, is the concept of hospitality staying open in the race to the bottom. The Eye for Travel conversation about how, in the rider's perspective, everybody's going to homogenize their rate, and it's really the same rate everywhere, and we're all just going to be at the bottom of that because we're going to always have to offer the lowest rate available for all that. Why are we getting duplicities of Roberts? Robert, you can't clone yourself, man. The sheep thing didn't work.
I'll try to figure that. I'll be right back. Maybe only once.
We do. They did it with sheep, and that's as far as they want to go. So, Lily, with that said, there's a bunch of others. Which ones did you find that when you perused through? Was there any other ones other than that you thought were worthy of starting the conversation with?
Well, there were a lot of really good articles, like you said. So I'm kind of interested in all of them. Definitely, you hit on two that are of special interest to me on the revenue management side, and interested to hear your thoughts as well on the Google article in particular.
The squeeze, yes.
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 And I do want to throw in, even though it's not a topic that Robert had thrown into this, Bert is turning into a very dominant conversation. Not Bert from Sesame Street, but Bert as in what people are saying is probably the largest update to Google in the past 5 years as to what the impact of what's going to happen. And a lot of big players, TripAdvisor, Expedia, they actually got hurt by Bert in their rankings and listings because of their data level profile. But yes, okay, so out of the hat, which one do you want to grab? Because I think Robert's having technical duplicity issues.
All right. Well, we have to wait for Robert to come back before we can talk about the check-in, because, we argued about that last week. So I want him to be here to, state his case.
Let's talk about Robert while he's gone. It's okay. We can bash him while he's not here. It's fine. Hey, Mr. Butler.
Hey, guys. How's everyone?
Hello. Well, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing good.
We were just ready to dive into Life Center Meetings, Cosmic Realities, and explain the universe in less than 20 minutes. You in?
Awesome. Let's go. String theory.
Oh, yeah. Let's do some string theory first and then a little quantum foam right after that.
There you go.
All right. Sorry. Just geeky.
Shall we start with the race to the bottom from Eye for Travel?
Sure. I'll put the link up and we can begin the discussion. Go right ahead.
So I did think that this was very interesting. We have this whole Marriott and Expedia thing going on with distributing wholesale rates, and the fact that those are making their way into the corporate booking tool, I'm pretty sure that was this article that it was talking about this, is definitely something that hoteliers should be concerned about, because we can't easily access or shop corporate booking tools, which means it's very difficult for us then to manage the parity and the display of these rates. And a lot of people are still doing these static rates with wholesalers that are significantly under what they would do elsewhere. So the idea, of course, being that they're supposed to be packaged with other things, but I highly doubt that on the corporate booking tools that that's happening with any regularity. So that definitely opens a lot of things up to interpretation. And the additional danger, hey, Tim.
Hey, Mr. Tim.
Hey, Tim.
The additional danger that I see there is that because it's being distributed through Expedia, in this case, right into the corporate booking tool, there is no opportunity necessarily for hoteliers midstream to renegotiate their contracts. Right. Because they're technically already on the contract with the wholesalers and already with Expedia, and nobody foresaw the need to put in language that says the wholesaler can't distribute it via Expedia to a corporate booking tool. So it's kind of wide open right now. That can cause a lot of problems for hoteliers. And I think that we're going to need to be really savvy about how to get kind of snapshots, find your friends in the industry who are able to view the corporate booking tools that can give you an idea of what's being displayed, and also very carefully scrub your agreements and make it known to the entities that you're working with that you won't stand for that type of redistribution.
I'm going to quote Mr. Tim Peter, who just joined us, and something that he pointed out. By the way, wonderful background, Mr. Tim. It looks like you're enjoying a mountain vista view, something or other.
This is actually my kitchen. I am having a little work done downstairs in our house, which is where my office is and the background noise is.
Oh, well, thank you for
Problematic.
joining.
So I'm not normally in the space. It's actually not the most productive space. There's great lighting, but on the wrong side. So like I'm backlit, which is...
No, you're doing pretty good. You don't look like you're in the witness protection program at all. You kind of look a little Lex Luthor. I mean, you got a little Lex Luthor thing going on, but I mean, other than that, you're looking fine.
So you're going to quote me, Lauren. I'm dying to hear what
okay, so a couple of years ago, you made this wonderful, and you were very adamant about this, and in fact, the whole show was talking about contract negotiations with OTAs, and contract negotiations with wholesalers is one of the most paramount things that are ignored by most hoteliers as a standardization of their other program. And you were talking about the fact that we miss this window of opportunity persistently, that we re-sign or automatically renew things without going back in and tearing apart the contract relationship to make sure that little loopholes like this can possibly be closed.
Well, and it's especially problematic. I mean, I think the brands do a very good job of negotiating the contracts, in general terms. It's especially a problem for independent. Well, I mean, yeah, there's always loopholes. There's always the things nobody thought to think about, right? But at the same time, the real problem is for independents who don't have a lot of leverage to actually negotiate terms, right? I mean, the contract is, sorry, that's our standard agreement. You can either sign or you can not be on the specific platform. And those are where you find yourself in some real trouble if you're an independent property owner.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that, though, Tim? A couple of years ago, we were really big into looking at the legal pushback that was available for OTAs bidding on brands and showing ads on brand keywords on Google. So we were working with a lawyer through an organization called OPMA that I work with, who had won a big case against off-site rental companies. And we just went through the exercise of reading contracts from Expedia and Booking for independent hotels, and we were surprised to find how different they were. And a lot of it was unbeknownst to the independent hotels.
Yeah.
But there was all kinds of nuance in every single one. No two contracts were the same. So there's definitely felt like some flexibility, but they're always going to try to take the maximum advantage of the independent hotel, understanding that they're probably not going to read every little point within the contract. But it definitely warrants you taking more time to read through it and having some legal expertise look at it, review it, and give you their opinion as well.
Well, there are two aspects, though. One is the legal side, and the other is truly the operational and the distribution side to really know how this stuff works, right? Because if you don't know that, I mean, I'm not sure, sorry, I was late coming in, but were you talking about the bundling side of doing sequential?
But now doing the distribution of wholesale rates into the corporate booking tools.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. So either sending them to a different channel, or a very common one now is, yes, it needs to be sold in a package. Well, what is a package? Package isn't defined. A lot of hotels assume, or hotel brands assume, that's a simultaneous, prepaid, non-refundable, non-cancel. And if it isn't stated, it can be anything. So they book the air, and then on the confirmation email, they send back, oh, would you like fries with that? And there's your hotel, and there's the pricing, and it's lower than your price. And there's nothing you can do. You have no legal recourse. Where are we forbidden to do that, right? So that's happening like crazy. Same thing with opaque stuff, where it's supposed to be opaque, the property's not identifiable. Does that mean that they can post TripAdvisor, not just numbers of circles and things like that, but the exact number of reviews? No, you need to have a term that says the property is unidentifiable, right? And you'll see there are some that don't have those. So those are the ones who either have better lawyers or smarter distribution people.
So I'm going to defend the brands, or at least one brand on this, for very specific and very self-serving reasons. I am married to somebody who actually negotiates these agreements on behalf of Wyndham, so I am confident they are ironclad, because she's really great at what she does.
And she's standing right behind you with a gun.
She isn't, but she may watch the show later, and so we need to make sure that I'm completely clean on this. I have no doubt in my mind that Wyndham's contracts are negotiated great.
I don't know about you guys, but I think we should start a drinking game every time Tim mentions Wyndham.
Well, we have bingo cards. We have bingo.
We have bingo cards.
We do have bingo.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay. Now we need to ask Lily,
But
are there any particular bingo items for me since you've been on the show?
Oh,
Ooh, that's a good
no
question.
hints. No hints. If she doesn't come up with any, you guys have to stop giving me such a
I
hard
think you've
time.
been light on it the last couple.
Yeah, you've been courteous.
And Lily, for clarity's sake, I often in the context of Wyndham would accuse myself, since this trod very directly into my wife world. I'm not mentioning Wyndham so much as I'm mentioning my marriage and how I like keeping it happy.
There you go.
There's no George and Kellyanne Conway action happening.
That's funny.
Having negotiated a contract with Tammy once before, horrible strategic error. I mean, when things really get tough, we'd normally take a hostage. We took Tim hostage. That didn't work at all.
She was like, that's
You actually improved the contract. You gave some margin.
She was like,
right.
She was like, thank
what do I have to give you to keep it?
That's right.
Oh man. So Robert, I don't know. For you, I can't say that it's a specific word. I only take note that you like to argue the opposite side of a point.
The Venmo is coming right at you. That's good.
Oh,
Thank you.
Lily.
You will see.
You will learn. You will find out.
Yeah.
You'll hear the word Cornell. You'll hear the word Four Seasons. Let's see what other fun things. Well, JD Powers gets tossed around a little bit more than he used to be.
What's I can never remember the name of it. It's a shame because I've only heard it like 30 times. But what was it called? Like Great Escape or Runaway or whatever it was called. The economy brand you worked with up in Canada.
Oh, Journey's End.
Journey's End.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Dead guy in a box.
Hey,
if you want a half hour to blink by, talk about identified inventory by sequential numbers or a universal ID number for most hotels.
The universal hospitality identifier. Yes, that would be very good.
So now I'm curious.
Dynamic pricing is another half
Dynamic
hour burn.
pricing. That's a tough one though. Can dynamic pricing really count? Because how do you discuss topics without dynamic pricing coming into the mix?
Oh, but you'll see Robert's from the origin of the dynamic pricing model. He will tell you the beginning when the stone tablet was first brought down from the mountain.
It's not the term, Lily. It's the history lesson.
It's the history lesson.
Oh, gotcha. I'm with you now.
Let me tell you when they
Am I on the bingo cards yet?
We have to be clear. You have to remember Robert is much, 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 much older than anyone else on the show. I mean, a lot. Like really, really.
I'm 178.
You're looking good, Robert.
He was there when he overbooked Bethlehem. Okay, he still will never live that down.
I was the guy who walked those guys. Hey, they didn't have a prepaid deposit. Oh, one story, 1 point on that. Okay, so Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking Holdings, pretty prominent guy in the hotel industry, is staying at, and I will name the property because he shellacked them on stage for about 15 minutes.
Oh wow!
The Curio by Hilton Diplomat Hotel in Hollywood Beach, Florida.
Wow. The old West.
So, Focusrite, since I do work for them, I do know the inside scoop. They had a list of VIPs who are who on the do not walk. Yeah, VIPs. These are the guys. So he comes in late at night. I don't know, it was maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. Comes up, goes, hi, I'm Glenn, that sort of thing. They go, oh, I'm very sorry, we don't have a room for you. And he's like, oh, it's being paid for by the group. I'm, an invited speaker, and they're like, no, we got nothing, sort of thing. And so like, oh, and who walks up behind him is Rob Torres from Google, right? So they kind of go, and they did have a room, but it was for Rob. And so Rob kind of offered it to them. And then they eventually did find a room for Glenn. So they were just flat out bald-faced lying to him. So, classic term. I talked to Glenn afterward. I told him the term is hospitality, right? That is what that is. It's inept management. It's bad processes. It's not. I mean, even in overbooking situations. Come on, I was a room division manager. This is rarely on my bingo card. Yellowstone National Park. A long time.
Come on, that's up there.
Yeah.
I have mentioned.
That's
And don't talk about the Austin
More
Hotel
than
either.
once.
Don't talk about the Austin Hotel either.
But any rooms division manager, front office manager who wants to complain, 600 units, room rack, manual, posting machines. We're talking World War II era, battleship gray, large things. No, none of this cash register stuff, and a 1.08 day length of stay. So, and running pretty much structurally full for 90 days. Yeah. So overbooking, you need to anticipate the problem and then have processes when they go into effect so you know the solution when it happens. It shouldn't be we have to figure this out. It's like we know this is going to happen and here's what we are doing. And Fogel did make some really good points, although he did go on much too long, I think, to avoid talking about a bunch of other topics.
Good strategy.
It was an excellent strategy.
Let's give the dip credit here. And I'm sorry for cutting you off, but let's give the dip credit because it shows that they're really paying attention to what's going on in the industry. That if they decided which, mega channel to piss off, the correct one was Booking.com, not Google.
Not Google, yeah.
Well,
Right?
And Fogel said, he's insulated from that. That never happens to him, right? And he hears about it happening every once in a while, and especially the hoteliers who, because it's booked through an OTA, treat their guests as second. But boy, let me tell you, I bet he was like, it happened to me, and I can only imagine what goes on with these guests. He's going to be all over it.
If only they told him he should have booked direct, and they would have avoided the problem. That would have been great.
We actually used to have this very real
that's the thing. He was booked through the group.
I know.
This was a very real problem we had at leading for the executive team. And yeah, that probably belongs to my bingo card. But this was a very real problem. We as execs, every time we stayed at one of our hotels, were supposed to write a post, stay report of did the property live up to the brand standards and things along those lines. And the number of times when I arrived to the front door of the hotel in a taxi, and this is the key, right? In a taxi, had the bellman open the door to the taxi and say, "Welcome, Mr. Peter," right? Because almost all of us on the senior team were marked people, there were photos of us at all the places. We were known when our reservation was on the books, and we're pretty sure we got, we expect every guest got really good treatment, but those were the cases where we worried we were getting different treatment than what the regular guest was getting because they when we walked through the door.
Sure.
Well, okay. One note on that. That's because Tim had both a front and a profile, and Interpol had it, and it was in post office.
Okay. So to wrap up, going backwards, first off, Robert, we were giving you a compliment that the list that you gave out today was exceptionally excellent. I mean, there's some really great topics into it today. And to wrap up on the first point of this,
as opposed to the regular week, which is just total crap.
Which is just crap. Yeah, just like whatever, keeping something together, some glue and paste and whatever. But no, just to conclude the first topic that we had about this on this contract rate and so forth. Other than negotiations of the contract when that time is due, what are other steps that can be done to somehow mitigate this leakage of these rates or this usability into third parties for the corporate travelers? Because they give some pretty rough numbers that 40% of corporate travel is going outside of their rate blocks and going into.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What are some other things? And I'm looking to Lily when I say this is like, can we mitigate now to try to stem some of that bleeding? Is there anything you've done successfully, or that it's just a bleed that's there and we have to chase down when they break ranks?
All of these are based on how you can have mutual wins between both parties. I mean, that is the bottom line. The corporate travel managers, they want compliance, right? Because they have all these duty of care issues. If something really goes bad, right, in a destination, they've got to figure out where are these people, what's going on, and they've booked outside of policy or something. That may create a problem, right? I mean, maybe it won't. Maybe they've they book through however, and some of these companies are now giving the
but it does
employees
create
enough
a liability
flexibility
issue.
where they're saying, yeah, you're getting $200 a night, well, but you get $200 a night, and if you want to go stay at some place, you get a hotwire thing for $110, you keep the difference or whatever. That's okay, but it creates this other thing on duty of care, right? Which is tough. So anything you can do to where you're helping them accomplish what they're trying to do, and then you can talk about the financial terms and go, okay, here's what we really need to have happen, and how you're stacked up against the competitors, and like, hey, we're giving you such and such, especially in the corporate market, right? You can talk to them about your upgrading policy. No, what we do at this rate, you're right. You may be able to get a $5, less at the hotel next door, because they will always give $5 less. That is their strategy, no matter what. But when we're closed, or whatever, we will, if we have an available room, we will upgrade your executives, or we'll do whatever to make things, what do you guys need? What works for you? And sometimes that works, sometimes it won't. Some people are just, they'll hammer on the lowest rate, or they'll be jerks or whatever. But no, those processes generally work and help on renegotiation contact with them. And hey, what's going on? Hey, we aren't seeing as many rooms as you thought, or anything we can do to help that. And you can do things in the middle of the year, going, hey, we can start doing some things to whatever. Hey, you guys seem to have training groups in here once a month. Maybe we could go do something with them, make something a little bit better. So whatever.
Yeah. And I think too, like a lot of this comes back to the data cleanliness topic that we talked about, because in theory, what I'd like to say is at check-in, have your front desk agents ask all of your guests, do you have a business card that I can use to enter your information instead of just an ID? Because then you can enter the company name, and if it's a company that you've negotiated with, but the booking came through an OTA or through a wholesale rate, you can more easily identify things that are off there. But we're still trying to get them to check IDs at all, or AAA cards. So adding a step probably is not realistic. But in a perfect world, that's what I'd love to see, is, companies being able to motivate their front office agents to get all of the data, make sure it's entered correctly, connect the guests, stay to their profile so that we can get a history on the guest. All of those things are super important. And until we crack the code and how we can get the front office to participate in things like that, I think that there's always going to be some limitations.
Robots, that's the answer. Just replace all front desk staff with robots. They'll be infallible. For sure.
I'm thinking more dinosaurs, like a Tyrannosaurus,
Yeah,
robot.
well, they did that.
They always have
right
here.
All right. To that end, there was the other topic.
The microphone is off, Robert.
Oh, good. I
was
hoping he wouldn't notice.
Okay. Who muted me? Thank you. No, I was going to say, if you book online, the number of hotels who do not give, or they don't want your frequent guest number, right? Because you don't qualify for points or whatever, you want their frequent guest number so you can start going, gee, Tim's, books through Booking, a third of the time, Hotwire a third of the time, his corporate rate a third of the, whatever the case may be.
Right.
That's really important information, and so many of them just. And again, the Diplomat messed up stuff for me. I'm a Hilton Honors member. I have the app. For some reason, they sent me a text message that said, "Hey, give us your email address so we can send you your folio." Right? I'm kind of like, oh, okay. And I thought, well, gee, it's part of the Focusrite block, but they had my, I don't know. I'm using the app. I didn't understand. And I actually got 2 of those emails. So I did. I replied back. It's like, and I gave my Focusrite email address, right? So that's fine. I never got the folio the next morning. And it's just like, what are you guys doing? This makes sense. So then I sent it, and there's a text string, right, with me, and I don't know what they're doing to manage on the other side. But I get the text, it goes, oh, what's your email address? Is it Rock Cheetah one? And it's, or no, he didn't even ask that. He said, what is your email address? And it's like, you have 2 of them. They're in the, I don't know who manages that hotel, but they're doing a shitty job. Sorry,
Well, that
guys.
is.
It deserves better. And the hotels for sale. The hotels for sale for $1 million a key for $1 billion, right? So
it's a
come on,
huge hotel.
guys. You got to do better than this. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the other topics we definitely didn't want to miss was the flexibility check-in, check-out. The article associated with come in, come out whenever you want to. How is that? Is that a positive thing, a good thing? Is it a monetization thing, or is it a loyalty thing? And it was I'll put the article link up for it. It was just one of the other good articles Mr. Robert put together for us today.
Hey, Robert, can you mute when you're not talking? The background noise in your Marie calendars is.
Or just turn around and tell everyone to hush.
Yeah.
Be that guy.
Or just tell everyone else to shut the hell up.
Just tell everyone to bugger off. No.
Nice.
So, what do you think? I mean, the article basically says that there are hotels, and I didn't know about this platform, the Hotel Flex, that is a program that is trying to optimize hotels to be able to do this based on their focus of whether they want to monetize it or whether they want to create a loyalty value to it. I didn't know that platform even existed, and I thought it was kind of interesting that it was out there.
I somewhat wonder if this article, not to derail the conversation, but I somewhat wonder if this article was pitched by.
Oh yeah.
Flex.
Yeah, you always have to bring assault these articles. Yeah, this is
Definitely seems a little.
It's a concept of it, not the article itself. It's a
No,
concept.
sure.
Is this something that should be considered beyond this?
We talked about this a week ago or two.
Right.
Yeah, we did.
It's a great idea, right? There's
In theory, right? In theory, it's a great idea.
As with all things, execution matters, right?
Right.
Specific execution matters. There's a great value to be had there, and for some properties, for some brands, it's going to make a lot of sense to say we're going to charge people for that value. For some properties, for some brands, it's going to be worthwhile to say, hey, we want to build loyalty, and this is a value add that we give to our. So I'm gonna shift this slightly to a conversation we've had lots of times about loyalty and the fact that so many loyalty programs in the industry are rewards programs instead of recognition programs, right? And this is a great way to recognize truly loyal guests and give them a value add without necessarily billing for it, but hopefully increasing the customer lifetime value by incentivizing them for being loyal and for coming back to see you again and again. But a lot of this is just going to come down to execution. I'm in favor of more hotels making this more available, as long as you make the operation side of it work correctly, and as long as it's aligned with what your brand value is.
But my fear is people are going to take this the way they have things like messaging, real-time messaging by SMS on property, and it's great in theory. It improves the guest experience, adds a lot of value to the entire process, but in 99% of cases, it is executed so poorly that it creates friction that wasn't there, and you end up having a detrimental effect. And that's my fear. So you've really got to think through the why, think through a whole strategy, think through the implementation, make sure you train people properly, and then set appropriate expectations. Because the reality is, even if you set this up in the best case scenario, and the way they described it is there's a 72-hour window where you find out whether or not it's available, or you have to notify them within 72 hours. But there's going to be times when, I may have stayed with the property 10 times and I was able to get the late checkout at 5 p.m. And then on the 11th time, I can't. And now all of a sudden, you've just eroded all of the positive sentiment you created in me. And now I'm pissed. And I wouldn't have been pissed if it hadn't been a thing. So I think you've got to really set expectations and handle the communication and the execution of how it's delivered really, really, really well.
I think that's right.
And the exception handling is very tough because especially if you're charging for it. Hey, my flight was delayed 3 hours. They don't want to. I'm sorry, you're going to pay for that. That's one. Or the same thing with delays. The whole flow of how these guests come and go. Yes, you can get it kind of reserved up, but one of the comments in there was, yes, we put housekeeping coming in on hourly shifts around the clock, and you go, oh, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
You need to have the housekeepers when the demand is. And again, if you're having problems getting your VIPs a room when they come in, this is not a program for you.
Well, it goes back to there was a platform that was out there that was trying to do short stay stuff, and I can't remember the name of it. I think it died. Where you have a long haul flights, you're coming in or you're leaving, and you can basically do like a few hours at a hotel. And there was the complexity of that being something of your regular check-ins versus the usability of short-term and stuff.
The Lincoln Motel has been doing that for decades, technically. Right by.
Yeah. But but then the inverse. I keep thinking of Robert's story when he was in New York, and they went over, and he came in early enough that he was trying to get the room, and then they wanted to bang him for $70, which was more than the room rate, to check in a couple hours early. And it's like, talk about a rubber band effect of despising the place at that point.
Oh no, that was after having me wait from 10 a.m. until noon for the hotel room to be cleaned, and then to pay $70 to check in at noon instead of the 3 p.m. check-in time when the room was now available.
Yeah.
That was
they put salt on the wound after cutting it twice.
Yeah, that was.
I thought it was interesting with the standard because they're making it 5% of the room rate. So at least in that case, it avoids having it be more than the room rate. I mean, 5% though. I wonder about the effect of goodwill versus the rate, because if their typical rate is say $150. You're talking about making $7.
Right.
Yeah.
What's that? Just to me, it's almost too low then, because then it feels like nickeling and diming more. So I feel like anything, anything below $20, the guest is like, really?
Yeah.
Rental car industry standards were always originally to give you an hour window, right? If you're an hour late, that's okay. Now that's been squeezed to like 30 minutes, and they've got stopwatches. It's pretty bold about it now. But if you go over, that additional hour is 1/3 of the daily rental.
Yeah.
Right?
So
they do that, and then you have 2 hours. Yeah, the second hour is the third. The third hour, you got the car for another day.
Can we not emulate the rental car industry? That's crazier than like any other.
Where they're learning these things.
Like somebody needs to crack the code on why it takes me 20 minutes to get the rental car.
So wait, attribute-based pricing. I mean, hey, do you want a coffee maker in the room? That's going to be an extra
$1
dollar.
Card, right?
Okay, so I want to come at this from a slightly different angle, and I'm probably gonna press trigger Lily, right? Because I'm going to come at this from a completely different perspective, the non-revenue perspective, and more the brand perspective. There's a very famous study they did in childcare.
I was going to bring this one up. It's great. I love it.
It's a great study. Where they had a problem. Somebody did a study where they discovered, child care centers have a problem with parents picking up kids late. It inconveniences the staff. They have to pay overtime. The child care facility has to pay overtime, things along those lines. And so what they had done for a long time was they basically, guilted the parents into, hey, come pick up your damn kids on time because you're inconveniencing people. And what they did instead was they ran the study, and it looked like it was well coordinated and everything. They ran it at a couple different facilities, double blind kind of stuff. But what they did was they started charging a fee, and it was, $10 for every 5 minutes you were late or something like that. I don't remember what the fee was. And what they discovered was that parents started picking up their kids on average later. Because they'd gone from a social contract of, hey, I'm going to pick up my kid because I don't want to inconvenience the people who take care of them all day, to a service they were being offered. Yep. And I can simply pay more and get a service. And so I think there's a question we want to ask, and it absolutely gets to Stuart's point about how you execute. But I also think there's a brand value prop. And what are you saying about your brand? If you're nickel and diming them or things along those lines, there are hotels I would absolutely pay for this, and I would be thrilled to have it. Right? I'm going to do the focus group of one thing. That's a bingo card item for me, probably. Not suggesting that I'm representative of all travelers by any stretch, but I'm certainly representative of certain type of traveler. Where I travel a lot on business. I often arrive early in the day, because I'm on an early flight or things like that. But the thing that I have to do may not start until the afternoon or the evening. And I would love an early check-in so I can go to my room and work, or I can go to my room and change my clothes or things along those lines before I have to go to a dinner.
By work, you mean nap, but
Yeah.
I do some of my best thinking prone.
With a mini bar nearby.
Yeah, exactly. But for those trips, for that kind of trip, I would absolutely pay extra for that. If I'm traveling internationally with my family and we arrive on an overnight flight, I absolutely would pay extra for it so we can go get a little rest before we go do whatever we're going to do. But, if I happen to be taking a weekend holiday or something along those lines and I arrive in town early and stuff, we'll just park the car and wander around town. We don't care, and I wouldn't pay extra for it. So I think there are certain types of properties where it works better to say we're going to charge for this from a brand value proposition perspective. And I think there are certain types of properties where it's going to work less well from a brand value proposition perspective. And I think you need to think about that too.
And going back to your point of the daycare scenario, you don't want to create this as the normal behavior for the majority of people, because that's logistically going to create a lot of challenges that don't exist today. It's already tough to turn around rooms. And we debated a couple of weeks ago about how if you could stagger that, maybe it alleviates some of the demand for housekeeping and such. But I really think if you end up squeezing everyone in the hotel for an extra 3, 4, 5, 10 hours, you're creating a really bad situation in terms of the quality of the product.
Do we start using arrival time? If you arrive at 11 a.m., you pay $100. If you arrive at 1 p.m., you pay $90.
It could be per hour, right? It's however early, something like that.
This is something I couldn't convince my New York clientele to do, and I did this in Melbourne, Florida, when I was GM about the Hilton Airport down there. There are certain flights that come in from certain destinations at certain times persistently. It's like one of your hometowns in New Guinea. Stuart, they fly in a certain time every year.
That's like a reverse bingo. Like, it's not me saying something, it's you guys saying it to me.
Anyway, there was a flight that was
before we ever wrap this show, Stuart, I'm determined to hear you say dingoes ate my baby.
Maybe over a beer. I don't think I got
over
it.
A beer. So anyway, this flight always came in from London at a certain time of the day, and it was always earlier than we had room availability for. So what we started doing was when we started taking reservations, we started getting London addresses, obviously, in part of the folio. We started pulling a separate list from those. And we reached out to them and said, look, more often than not, the rooms, if it's available to you, we will do an early check-in for you if the room is available. But certain circumstances or not, we invite you to, we're going to leave our restaurant open, and we have a lobby bar also. And we'd like to offer you a complimentary lunch and first cocktail just to chill. We'll hold your bags for if you like. There's a bus service that can bring you out if you just want to change clothes. We have the gym facilities that have restrooms and so forth if you want to change clothes for it and so forth. And, try to accommodate the knowing that more often than not, we wouldn't have the rooms available for them, but giving them an alternative to it. And the other is, in my hotels I was in Key Largo for, everyone wanted to stay late. Obviously.
Yeah.
So the reverse of it was we had completely set up a system where we're asking you to check out on time. We will hold your bags. We have full bathroom shower facilities near the pool area and so forth. You can stay on property, enjoy yourself. We're going to give you a discount to the restaurant. We didn't give them free food. We gave them a discount to the restaurant. Enjoy your time until you leave in the afternoon. But you got to get out of the room because everybody that, when you came in, you wanted to get in the room when it was due. Yeah. Well, those people are right behind you, so they're going to be coming in too. So, do us this courtesy of checking out on time, and this is what we're willing to offer you. I tried to do that with my New York property, saying, look, guys, you're going to get some more international travel if you can make this flex of saying, look, we can't necessarily get to the room all the time, but this is what we can do for you.
Yeah.
No. And it's like,
you want to be careful how you say that, because you never, ever want to plant the seed in any guest's head that there's someone slept in that room before or after them. Like, it's,
I tell them that George Washington slept there. The guy from New Guinea slept there.
No, that is a pristine, clean room. No one's ever been in that room before.
It's funny that you say that. There is nothing that skeeves me out more these days. I'm not kidding. This is such a funny point. I'm completely digressing, but nothing skeeves me out more than those sanitary TV remote controls.
Yeah.
Have you seen those? The ones that they're like the white antibacterial.
If you're lucky, they're white. I've checked in a couple times and it's been a dingy gray, and I'm like, this may be flat, but I don't think it's sanitary.
But even if they look white, there's nothing I want to touch. You've reminded me of the fact that it needs antibacterial. A regular, plain old, ordinary remote control, I pick that up. I do it.
Yeah, I don't think
it's a good
millions.
It's a good thing.
Well, it's kind of like not putting It's kind of like not reading an article about how hot dogs are made before you enjoy your 4th of July cookout. Sometimes you just want to have that.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss.
That's exactly right.
So going back to the article, you have all been just making my point for me, and I want to thank you all for that so much, that I brought up last week, which is if we had booking systems with 24-hour check-in where you picked your arrival and departure times at the time of the reservation and your room rate was based on how long or how short you were staying, this would not be an operational nightmare, as Robert kindly suggested last week that it could be, because you would already know who's checking out early from Key Largo, and that way you could use that room to accommodate the people who are checking in early, and the system wouldn't allow them to book if the room wasn't ready early anyway.
Really, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. All we have to do now is replace all the property management systems.
Absolutely. So tomorrow sounds like
we should be get right on that,
Right. And that's a valid point. So I do kind of
and re-educate every single guest ever as well.
So,
right. But I do really appreciate that people are attempting to make steps, because to be honest, that's how technology is developed. Nobody's going to develop a technology without a use case that has been tested. So once we get further down the road with this and we're like, okay, this is working really well from a financial aspect until we have to give a bunch of refunds to guests because they're unhappy or whatever the case may be, we're going to actually have data behind it that hopefully developers will take a look at and begin to build systems that support this type of check-in and check-out. Because if it was available to them from the get-go, then the guests wouldn't be unhappy because they would know exactly what time they reserved an arrival and a departure.
I have a legitimate question here. This is not a leading question. This isn't a loaded question because I don't know the answer to this at all. Do any of you have any examples of properties who actually keep track of the number of guests who ask for late check-in, late check-out, early check-in, late check-out?
No.
Yeah.
So you want the front desk agents to do something, Tim?
I'm sorry?
You want the front desk agents to track something?
Totally. I get it.
UK properties do certainly.
I'm sorry?
Certainly for morning arrivals. UK properties for morning arrivals and things like that, certainly doing a big way. A lot of the ones with Derate
problem, but I'd love to know how big a problem this really is. For some properties,
a lot of
it doesn't exist. For some properties, I'm sure it happens, literally with 2/3 of the guests they get every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think probably those that charge for it probably have some sort of a monitoring of it in that sense.
Right. Yeah. Well, certainly these folks.
Maybe not the denials of people that said, screw you, I'm not going to pay it, but they definitely would have a list of those that said, okay, fine.
But the key is to get it into the property management system because a lot of these things like Derate, there have been like a half dozen or more who've tried to get into this, day rate rental. And it's very lucrative if you can execute well. But you've got to get it integrated with your main PMS because otherwise now you have this small little block of rooms, which it may need to be bigger sometimes or smaller, and it just creates so many issues, right? Where it's tough. Yeah, you really need a rule-based system. And my recommendation actually is to have, because you also want to make it simple. You don't want to create so many. You can't tell how much it's going to cost. And if you're variably pricing it by days versus nights versus hours, it's going to be impossible. But you should have my theory would be, you have a rate. It's $150. If you want to come in early, you can add this much. If you want to stay late, it's this much. If you only need it during the day, it's this, so you can at least kind of categorize it into commonly demanded,
I tried to do that back in 2011. I thought that this was lovely. We were implementing iHotelier at an independent resort, and I saw that there was an option for me to build this. And you could say, if you want to check in between this and this, it's this much. If you want this and this, it's this much. It was built as sort of like a package. And so I had implemented that originally, and I got huge pushback from management saying, we don't want to piss off our guests, so don't charge for early departures and late checkouts ever. And I was like, okay, but shouldn't there be a balance between the two? So I think that that's something that we're also fighting is the ability to push for that versus, the the kind of pushback of we can't ever do anything where we're asking our guests for money because it will upset them, which is where we're the far opposite of the airline industry, right? They're too far one way, we're too far the other way. I know we try not to talk about politics, but that's basically what this is two very, very polar sides of a topic. And I think that there's always going to be a happy medium. And I will say that for some brands or for some hotels, they may need to be slightly on one side, whereas others may need to be slightly on the other side, depending on the demographics of their user base or their customer base. So I think that that's really important for people to understand what's important to the type of guests that you have. If you're a heavily leisure hotel, probably you should be charging for early check-in and late checkout, to Tim's focus group of 1 point. Whereas if you are a business hotel, and you can include it maybe in negotiated rates, but not in other rates. And that goes back to people booking outside of the user block because they don't get that type of a benefit. So you really, you have to customize what you're doing to your user base and what makes sense and what's valued to them. I actually just had this happen to me a couple of weeks ago when I was at the innovation conference. I couldn't get a flight out on Friday night. And so because I had several conference calls on Friday afternoon, I transferred from a hotel in Manhattan over to an airport property, and I wanted to check in at 10 a.m. because I had conference calls and I did not want to be taking those in the lobby, right? Yeah. So I asked to check in. She's like, well, it's going to be $50. And I was like, ugh, I'm really not trying to spend money right now. She said, but because it was a Holiday Inn, if you sign up for Priority Club, I can give it to you for free. And I was like, okay, I don't care about more emails. I get enough junk emails as it is. Sign me up for Priority Club. I very seldom pay for hotel rooms, so this is not ever going to do me any good. But if it gets me an early check-in right now, I am happy to help you with your quota of signing up extra Priority Club members at the desk today.
Okay, so I'm going to come back around on this one, as that is exactly what you don't want to do. You as the guest want that. But
yeah, it's great for me.
You're getting so little value out of that person signing up for your loyalty program in most cases.
But I guarantee they have a quota at the desk.
Oh, they absolutely.
What we don't talk about with this is breakage. A lot of people sign up for this stuff and just unsubscribe as soon as it comes through.
Well, I've said this more than once on this show. I know a guy with a Harley Davidson tattoo, right? I know a guy with the Apple logo tattooed on his arm. I have never met anybody with a Hilton tattoo.
Right? But Barack Obama may have a Hampton Inn tattoo that we don't know about.
What's that?
But Barack Obama may have a Hampton Inn tattoo that we don't know about.
That's true. And Robert does have a Four Seasons tattoo in a place we don't want to see it, but that's a whole other story.
That's right.
There's the other article.
It's a very nice little tree.
Yeah, it does tie into another article, which is the loyalty program one, where they're talking about membership, because we've had that discussion before. Is their membership reward? I'd like to add one closing comment to the last item of it. I think you should put a fee structure associated with the value proposition of these kind of things, and then just have it so it's on file. So if you do want to refer to it, if you ever want to go to it as a value proposition of what you're not charging somebody, kind of a reverse of it, like, hey, we could charge you this, but we're not because you're doing this. Rather than not have it at all, it should at least be, to your point, with a strong leisure market where you have the value proposition of earlier or late check-ins, then that is a value proposition you can show that you're getting because you're trying to create some sort of loyalty or relationship value to them. So yeah, but the membership one, I
told you this story when I was at the meeting. We had a meeting with a property, and the property, the guy who he was like, I don't remember what his title was at the property. He was essentially like the controller or something like that. Was in the meeting. He was one of the AGMs, and he was responsible for the financial side. And he was talking about how they made more revenue by taking a whole bunch of stuff that had been, back of house type of things and turning them into various kinds of fee-based services, and things, right? Sorry, I'm telling the story badly because I don't remember the specifics of the room types that they created. Nonetheless, our chief marketing officer at the time said, right, but what about the intangible brand value of some of these things and not charging for it? And he said, it's very simple. He said, anytime we talk about intangible brand value, we pay for those with intangible dollars. Now, I don't know that that's exactly the right approach in every case, but yes, Lauren, I agree with you. You should have at least an understanding of what the economic value is to you. again, we have a revenue management professional who does this every single day on the call or on the show. But I always start with value-based pricing. I mean, when we think about revenue, when we think about what we're charging, when we think about what the going rate is or whatever, we also have to be thinking about what is the value to the guest, and then pricing that accordingly, or not pricing it and offering it as a value add. Mm-hmm. But it's always based on what is this doing for the perception of the value that the guest gets for what they're paying you, right?
Right. And are you exceeding their expectations?
And are you, well,
that is a huge,
actually, are you
because to get that social.
I agree with you. Exceeding would be great, but can we start with needing?
Yeah, can we at least take the line?
Right?
No, but you were talking. You made a great point about the social contract versus just kind of the financial, legal commitment sort of thing. Anytime you can get on that, and with the clerks going, hey, here, yes, you can come in early. That I think we normally charge for it, but hey, I'm taking care of you. Huge benefit to that sort of thing. And your policy may be, you don't have to charge anybody. It's not, you do not have a quota to go collect so much in early revenue, early arrival revenue. So if you can do things like that, the most successful concierges, I mean, super high-end concierges who would get, $500 tips going out, they would refuse to, a lot of the Europeans would need postage stamps, right? Not so much in the internet era, but that was like a little thing. This one guy, unbelievable. He refused. That was kind of his little shtick. He would not let them pay for postage stamps. It was and he would get indignant and argue with them loudly, and you are insulting my profession. And they would check, and he would insist, and he would throw money back at them and go, "You're insulting me." And boy, they loved the guy, right? They would come back. It was unbelievable. Yeah. So anyway, I have got to go. My daughter is just finished her interview for graduate school, and I need to go pick her up. So
wow,
you gonna take her for a piece of pie?
Well, I'm going to talk to her. Like, is she out early because it went well, or it didn't? I don't know.
Well, hopefully everything went very well.
No. She said it went well. So
the first question was, "Are you related to Robert Cole?" And she's like, "Yes." And like, this interview.
She knows the answer to that. No, not in the slide. One point before I go that came out of a piece of Focusrite research, and then Kara Swisher comment about rundles, which is recurring revenue bundles, are a huge thing driving valuations on internet shares. Focusrite asked travelers if Amazon offered travel services, would you use them instead of your current preferred provider?
That was a scary number.
Who you normally go to. Right? Like what you're currently 42% said, yeah.
I wonder if you'd asked, though, 5 years ago, if Amazon offered a phone, would you switch to them? How many people would have said yes, theoretically, right? And how many people now use an Amazon phone? So,
and also, Amazon did offer travel services for a while there, and they took them off.
I only knew about two
because they could never quite crack the code.
Hey, can I do my anti-Amazon and travel rant? That I'm going to be wrong.
On that note, I will leave.
See you, Mr. Robert.
And I hit the red button.
Turn the show off. No, not hit the red button.
Have you told Lily about not hitting the red button?
I didn't have to. She came into the concept much smarter than we did.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Red bad.
All right. So I'll do this really quick because I fully acknowledge that the problem with making bold proclamations like the one I'm about to is you only have to be wrong once, right? This is one of those where there's a lot of ways for me to be wrong and only one way for me to be right, which is Amazon never enters travel again, right? Mm-hmm. That there's a very strong argument to be made that Amazon is not well suited to travel. This is the argument, and I lean towards it, but they could certainly prove me wrong easily, as I just stated, right? The things that make Amazon great today actually don't benefit the travel ecosystem at all, right? They have tons and tons and tons of inventory that they can warehouse easily. Well, obviously in travel, that's, their access to inventory is going to be limited by connectivity and things along those lines, right? They have free shipping and fast shipping. They can put it in people's hands really quick. Obviously, again, with travel, there's no benefit there, right? So the things that make them effective at typical e-commerce and the things that make travel don't necessarily align. And Stuart, it's very much to your point about the phone. They have benefits in some very clear areas that make them very tough to compete with if you are also competing in those areas. And if you're competing in a different area, those benefits don't actually advantage them in this new space.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, I could be dead wrong about this because they could solve for these lots of different ways.
But they don't have the huge advantage that
but they don't have the huge advantage
right,
that they have when they're competing with Walmart or when they're competing with, other physical retailers.
Yeah. And the weird thing about brand perception is it's very narrow. Like what you trust a brand for in your life varies dramatically. Like what I trust Apple with, I use an Apple phone and Apple computer. But when Apple TV Plus came out, I have no interest in that. There's no value for me, and there's no brand tie to them as a media producer.
Right.
And so, but Disney, who I don't have any other affinity with other than I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, I jumped on and pre-bought that way beforehand, So, and they came out similar price point, similar time. Content was obviously different, but brands, the different brands mean a different thing to me at different points in my life. Amazon and travel just isn't synonymous to me. I don't know that I would just go to Amazon for travel just because they had it. They'd have to give me a value that I don't get somewhere else.
Right.
I will say to Tim's point, though, it seems like you are describing Amazon as an e-commerce retail company.
I'm not. I'm saying that they are advantages in those specific categories that they dominate.
But we know what kind of company they are, right?
Well, there's a couple different kinds of companies, right? They are a logistics company. They are a hosting company. They are a e-commerce company. They're a marketplace.
But at the very top, Amazon is a data company.
Yeah, I get that, but I have a huge problem with that, Lily. I have a huge problem with that formulation. And the problem I have with that formulation is it's data in service of what? There has to be a customer demand for something that they provide to those customers.
And they're gathering that information through AWS. So because they're creating
Yes and no.
Cloud hosting for, when I was at the innovation conference, I went to an AWS thing, and they are helping entrepreneurs build out new companies on their cloud and seeing exactly what's performing well and what's not performing well of the latest technology, the latest services that are happening. So I'm sure that in their agreements, they jointly own a lot of that data and they can leverage that. Now, whether or not that allows them to get into travel is something else entirely. But I think
they don't jointly own the data, though. I'm actually an advisor to a company that is built on AWS, and that data belongs to the company. AWS has no rights to that data.
It's kind of like Boeing to the airline.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would build on that platform if that were the case.
Correct.
Sure.
Well, it's like Boeing to the airlines. Boeing isn't in the airline business. They're in the plane making business, and the airlines use their product. It's the same too with is how I imagine Amazon. Amazon's in the Microsoft cloud business.
Microsoft sells fairly successfully against Amazon with certain types of enterprises by literally telling people, we can guarantee you we're never getting into your business. We only provide the platform, right? Yeah. But don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of companies like to say they're a data company, and data is incredibly powerful. And
some may say it's the crown jewels.
Some even say it's
a new currency.
Well, that's a line of mine. Actually, it starts being funny. I would say content is king, customer experience is queen, and data is the crown jewel. So I actually agree with that completely.
Because you say it, I would hope you agree with it.
But so the data that they get, where you are 100% right, that is incredibly valuable, is they do get to see what kinds of services are most successful on AWS, right? They can see, hey, we got a whole bunch of travel folks over here who are doing very well. Maybe there's a there. They they also probably get some of that data just by people who go into, the search box on Amazon.com or on A9 or things like that and type in travel deals. And I'm sure that occurs today, that they're probably looking at that kinds of data from that perspective.
Oh, and there's cookies all over the place, because anything I search online, whether I search it on Amazon or not, I probably get an ad for it in Amazon. So,
and to me, that's the most likely place where they get into travel. And we've seen some in a bigger way. And we've seen some examples of this. Amazon is one of the biggest sellers of advertising in the world. It is an enormous component of their business. And so, we've seen things where you have Prime offers where, hey, as a Prime member, you get a deal on specific types of travel or the like. I can absolutely see that growing and the like. But if you think about things like AWS, if you think about what they've done with logistics in terms of, so you all know FedEx fired Amazon, right? FedEx fired Amazon because Amazon has its own fleets of trucks and planes and such.
Right.
What Amazon does that's very smart, very, very smart. And, there's this myth that they started AWS because they said, wow, we have all this excess hosting capacity. We should start selling to people. That is not what happened at all. What Amazon looked at was said, we have a need for flexible storage. We have a need for flexible bandwidth. We have a need for flexible hosting because our volumes over the course of the year vary widely based on, Prime Day, Black Friday, holidays, whatever. And when I say our, I mean the marketplace as well as, the things that they sell as a merchant directly. And so they then looked and said, can we get into the picks and shovels business, right, in a mining boom, and actually create a service that, yes, we will be the first customer for, but we can then sell to other people, but set up as a separate thing that we are the first customer. And with logistics, with trucking and shipping and freight, they did exactly the same thing. They are the first customer, but they build it to sell to a second customer and a third customer and a fourth customer.
I think
that's the third reason why I don't know that travel's a perfect fit for them.
Right.
Because I don't know that they're the first customer ever for that.
Yeah.
Maybe they are, but it just doesn't seem to align with the things that they tend to do. And again, all I have to do is be wrong once on this. There's a lot of ways to be wrong and only one way to be right.
Well, and they've tried several times. They don't see it the same way you do. They've tried to get into travel.
They keep looking for the way to say, how do we get there?
Well, I think that if they're smart, what they would do is make it more of a referral out where they can sort of display inventory, partner with, or, crazy idea, acquire Expedia or Booking, something along those lines. That would be a big move if Google or Amazon were to acquire one of them rather than try to build their own ecosystem. Yeah. And I think that, it would be really interesting, though, and Google's probably even better positioned for the analytics on this, but what people are buying, does that relate in any way to their travel? For example, if somebody's always buying wine gift baskets or something like that, where wine themed items on Amazon, do you target them with wine country vacations?
Mm-hmm.
There's some implications there that could be really interesting. And honestly, it would be helpful. We talked a little bit last week about destination properties who need to compete on a national scale instead of a local scale. That could be really beneficial to them. So maybe they should be targeting it from a marketing perspective. We can sell you better targeted marketing.
And I think that's the way they would inevitably have to go, because they don't have, you're right, they have a lot of data, but they don't have the right kind of data, because they have inferable data. Like if someone buys a suitcase, that there's an inference that they're traveling or whatnot, but they don't have the right travel data in terms of when people are traveling, where they're traveling, what they're interested in when they travel, what they're doing when they travel. So folks like Google have more data and better data. TripAdvisor certainly does. Expedia does. Booking does. There's all these other companies out there that have better data than them on this particular challenge or problem. So I think they would have to either dip their toe into it through advertising and do what Google did, go from advertising to meta search to direct bookings to essentially taking over the travel industry. They're either going to have to do that or they're going to have to go acquire someone.
I don't remember the
exact successful.
I don't remember the exact phrase, but I kind of look at Amazon as being the big guy in the room, and you're on. And I don't like I said, you're only smart until you open your mouth. With just standing there being big and intimidating is probably more of an impact of us talking about this than the fact that they get into the space and they're not good at it. That they start trying to get engaged with this, because to your point, logistically, their logistics don't fit into what we're doing, which kind of ties to one of the other articles, which is the complete trip, the magic unicorn, ability to combine these things. Because when you look at Amazon from a retail perspective, their suggestive tool, if you bought this, you might like this. If you get this, most people get this. When you look at this, these are other things that have been looked at. That suggestive combination tool, that has something you look at and go, man, wouldn't that be great in the travel space where, I'm doing this trip. So I want those things to be brought to my attention without me having to go find out that there was a widget that I should have had bought when I bought this thing. I didn't want to miss the biggest ball of twine when I was in the town that had it, So those kind of thoughts are really cool ideas. But, like I said, jumping over to the other article, it seems like this is, according to the article, a race of attention where Expedia is trying to think that they're going to get ahead of the Google issue, which I totally want to geek out about, Mr. Stewart, about the Google squeeze, and also Bert. I just went, Milestone did a great webinar. I highly recommend you play back. Banu is phenomenally talented at SEO, and she did a great webinar on describing the real impact of BERT as to what it's doing. And it ties a little bit to the Google Squeeze article, but I want to try to hit on this connected trip. I didn't know that this was this was, to me, a fiction story. Everyone wants this ability for it to go together. I didn't realize that it's turned into a major blown effort.
Do they, though? Do you think that's true, a statement, that everyone wants this, like to what they're describing?
Oh, I do. I absolutely do. It's think about the Star Trek computer, right, for a second.
Every minute of every day I think about that.
Exactly. I knew I was going to be talking your language.
Yeah.
So the idea of the connected trip is, first, let's take a big step back and just define terms for a second. The way I think about it, and I think the way the article talks about it a fair bit, is, how do you alert people to things that are going to be of value to them when they're on their journey? And more broadly, how do you help them recover from, more specifically, how do you help them recover when there are issues? Your flight has been delayed. How do we get you where you need to go, and the like? If you could, in fact, do that well, where, whether it's via technology, machine learning, whatever, it doesn't matter, how you get there. It matters that you do it effectively. That's an enormous differentiator for me to want to do all my booking through Expedia or Booking.com, and in this specific case, explicitly not go to Google, right?
Sure.
Because it's I want to use Expedia because they know everything about my travel and they're going to take care of me every step of the way. That's an enormous advantage for an Expedia or a Booking.
Right, I get that in theory, right? But in reality, how many apps do you use on your phone? Like if you went and swiped up right now,
literally use like 8. And I use a lot compared to a lot of people.
User install.
You use 8 apps. Swipe up on your phone. Everyone do this for me real quick and see how many, if you haven't killed your apps, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Are we going with what's installed, and are we counting?
No, I'm talking about what's open. What's an active app right now on your phone? I have 25, right? 25
here's all my apps that I have on my phone.
Right. There's a reason that a Facebook exists, and a Twitter exists, and a WhatsApp exists, and an Instagram exists, and all these other social, and a Snapchat exists, right? Because they all do things slightly different and have a slightly different value proposition, and they're best in class at doing that thing that you want, that value that you want to get from them. I don't believe that it's realistic to assume that one person's going to get this supremacy in every aspect of the travel to where I'm benefited by using one solution, whether it's an app or an ecosystem or whatever. I don't think that's how consumers work, and it boxes us in too, and it eliminates choice.
But here's the thing, right? It's the old joke about the two guys walking through the woods, and a bear comes charging towards them, and the first guy just drops down, pulls off his boots, puts on a pair of shoes, a pair of running shoes, right? I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
Sure.
They don't have to get it perfect. They just have to do it better than Google is going to do it.
I think it's a confidence issue.
I know that Google is doing a better job of this than
I don't know, because I'm doing a Tim Peter. This is a one person, right? This is just my opinion. I'm always going to prefer.
By the way, I can point out we all do this. I just call it out when I do it.
This is true. I'm always going to prefer to use disparate systems that provide unique value in my unique context than one ecosystem that tries to do everything kind of okay. I want the best at each thing, personally.
Well, I've been burned by
consumers
this
do.
That's why I tried to think of being the complete resource, and it never works because I try to make a hotel go, I want to let you know of all the cool stuff that's in the market, and it's a FOMO thing, it's a fear of missing out, and it's also a trust issue. Why should I trust that what you're showing me on your map, on your hotel website, is everything that I might be interested in? I'm still going to go to Google and look at Google's map and make sure that I'm not missing something.
I don't agree. And the reason I don't agree is not a focus group. One, it's decades of consumer research on this topic of the idea of satisficing, right? People will stop when it's good enough. And the reason you go to these different apps today, and I want to be very clear, obviously you use Twitter for a specific thing. You use Facebook for a specific thing. You use LinkedIn for a specific thing. There's actually a reason for that specific set of behaviors, which is that you are segregating the publics that you talk to into different universes, right? So that's a very specific set of behavior. But when you're looking for information, you're looking for information till you get your question answered. The reason people look around today is because they don't get great answers. As good as Google is, as good as Google has gotten compared to what search looked like 20 years ago, it still sucks. Because sometimes, it's the old joke about if I search for Java, sometimes I'm looking for the island in the South Pacific, sometimes I'm looking for the programming language, and sometimes I'm looking for a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. And the reality is Google doesn't get that right near often enough in terms of knowing what I meant on that specific one.
But Bert is helping.
Bert's helping.
Bert will absolutely help with that. But Bert is, I haven't seen the Banu thing, and Banu is brilliant, so I don't want to sound like I'm crapping on my.
No, she's just about how to work around what it's doing.
Yeah, Bert is really cool and really important and all that other kind of stuff. And also, it probably amounts to 10% of the searches on mobile in terms of the places where it will come into effect. So, it's a piece of a piece.
And it's only in the U.S. right now. It's only in English.
Yeah. So, it is a perfect representation of exactly what we're talking about, of the technology being sophisticated enough to anticipate and do the right thing, right? But it's only 10% of 50%, and only in the U.S. because this is a really hard problem to solve.
All right, so let me ask you this: for anything you ever want to search for, do you always use Google? I bet you don't, because if it's a video, you're probably on YouTube, or if it's a product, you're probably on Amazon, or if it's a director for a movie, it's probably on IMDb. And or if it's an ex-girlfriend, it's probably on Facebook. So
ExpediaBooking.com want it to be that if I'm looking for travel, it's ExpediaBooking.com.
Right.
That's the problem they're trying to solve, right?
But it's partly that, but it's also trying to take control of the entire experience of travel, from the flight, in the car, in the hotel, and everything, right? From the customer's perspective, they want to control
I think
behavior, Stuart. That's what it is.
It's kind of the dichotomy between customers want convenience, but they also want choices. They want to feel like they're being given choices. They want to feel like they're getting the best deal. And without there appearing to be competition, they're not going to feel like they're getting the best deal, which is how direct booking issues started in the first place, right, for hotels. So I think that it really just depends, because I love the connected trip in theory, but would I trust that app to get me as good of a replacement flight as what I can do on my own? Because I guarantee you, if my flight is delayed, like let's say I have a connection and my second flight is going to be delayed. I'm a super impatient person when it comes to airports. I don't like to hang out there. So before we have pulled up to the gate, I have already identified if there is a satisfactory replacement flight on any airline that will accommodate me, if I'm on a United or something like that. I'm looking at the whole Star Alliance. I've already pulled up the entire airport's flight ecosystem of what's going out to my desired point of arrival. And I will walk right up to the gate and say, hey, I need you to rebook me on this specific flight number.
By the way, I agree, but this is where the focus group of one is very dangerous, because one, we are all very sophisticated travelers.
Right, absolutely. Right. And I think that there's a huge market for it, because I will say that, I work with a lot of sophisticated people, but when it comes to my team traveling, if one of them loses their connection, they're more likely to be frustrated.
That's right.
I'm more likely to solve it before they get to their connection for them remotely. And so that's where it would come in handy, because one person can't always do that for everybody. And so it would be a boon to a lot of people.
And my point is, it would, if you pulled up to the terminal rather, and your phone had already alerted you, let's just say the Expedia app, right? I'll make Expedia the hero here for a second, which is probably the only time in history you will ever hear me say those words. Right? But if the Expedia app has alerted you to the fact of, hey, your connecting flight is delayed, here are 3 other options that we've found that we think will work for you, right? And they get that right compared to you doing the research a couple of times in a row, in all likelihood, you're going to start to trust them. That's the Holy Grail. They got a long way to go to get to the Holy Grail, but it goes precisely to what you said a moment ago of, you're absolutely right. When I'm looking for a video, I go to YouTube. And when I'm looking for, I want to buy a new pop socket for my phone, I go to Amazon. When I'm looking for, whatever, I go to, I'm looking to hire somebody, I go to Indeed, right? So that's absolutely true. What Booking and Expedia are terrified of is that when you need that in travel, you will do it at Google, and then they lose the whole ball of wax.
Yeah,
that's literally what they.
I get why they're trying to do it. I don't have confidence in their ability to deliver.
I agree with that.
They're going to come in pieces. Like, it would be really nice if when I get to an airport and I've trusted Uber enough that they're going to pre-qualify a car for me to show up on, and they're just going to show me how to get to where I need to go get to the Uber car. Those kind of
nice.
kind of helpful things, and rather than one of the things I did, and people look at me really strange, but they do that anyway. Yeah. I'm walking now with my little POV camera that I have when I leave from the gate to the taxi place.
With the 10-foot pole?
No. I got it in New York.
You're a civil liberties nightmare.
10-foot pole. They were like, hey! But anyway, so I do my little POV thing, okay? And now I'm hyperlapsing them, because now I'm trying to put them onto the websites for people that are traveling that are there's a travel anxieties and so forth. It's okay. Well, I'm here. How do I get to there? And so I wanted to take the bus and the train to get to one of my clients' hotels from the airport, from LaGuardia, rather than doing Uber. So I literally video snapped, the going down to where you go to the bus and getting on the bus, from the bus to the train on, and then showing the train and so forth. And I'm montaging that into a hyperlapse so that if there's if you to save a couple of bucks, it costs you $3 to get to the hotel from the LaGuardia, and you don't have to mess with traffic. Here's how you do it. And it's just a little, and it pauses when it gets to a place you got to recognize, and then zooms in when it accelerates the timeline. And it's just it's a content thing. And this goes back to a little bit more of our Google Squeeze conversation and the Burke conversation, stuff like this. It's the zero-click options that are coming now, the amount of traffic that's going to it, the authenticity now that I can go over, and when you're saying, how do I get to my XYZ hotel from LaGuardia, the answer's on my website, not somebody else's. That zero, Google click is there kind of thing.
But that's what Booking and Expedia are trying to say. Is they're trying to say we should be the destination. Think about the things today that should be easy. I live in a semi-rural area. I live in technically what they call exurban, the exurbs, not the suburbs, right?
Yeah.
It's old farmland that is being gentrified in reverse, I guess. People moving out to whatever. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the point being, if I go to Google Maps and I say I want to take the train to New York City, it tells me I can't get there from here.
Right.
Despite the fact that I can get in my car and I can drive 15 minutes to a train station. And they ought to be smart enough to tell me, well, you can't take the train all the way, but what you can do is this, right? Mm-hmm. That's the thing that Booking and Expedia are trying to solve for. Narrowed down to a very simple use case. We know you're going from point A to point B. We'd like to know you're renting a car or you're taking an Uber. We'd like to know you're staying in this hotel or that hotel. And we'd like to be able to say, if things come up along the way of something that's a service recovery issue, which I suspect is what's driving this more, right? Or an enhancement issue of, hey, we know you like a lot about the world's largest ball of twine. We should let you know that it's actually a 20-minute walk from here. That's the thing they want to do, so that when people want to search for travel, they will start by going to Booking or Expedia. As opposed to Google is where they're going.
What do you? So we're going to do a straw poll of 4. So what do you guys use for GPS in your car when you're trying to get somewhere for directions?
Google.
I use
Google Maps.
In my car, I use Waze.
Okay, Waze.
Oh, yeah, true. Yes.
Which is owned by Alphabet, right? That's a Google product now.
No. Wait. No, this is perfect, though. This also gets to your point. Waze is owned by Google, right?
Yeah.
But it is a very different consumer experience.
Yeah.
Because Waze is optimized.
So, Lily, you use Google Maps, is what you said? What do you use, Lauren?
I use Waze if I'm driving because of traffic concerns of things and stuff. But I usually Google Maps.
And I use Waze as well, right? And it is owned by Google, but it is operated completely independent. It's part of Alphabet, right? So it's
they are bringing some of that stuff to the Google.
They
Maps.
are, right? But it does certain things better than Google Maps. It does certain things better than Apple Maps. And do we all have iPhones? What do you have, Lily? Do you have an iPhone?
Android.
So that you're using the default mapping. So the other 3 of us that use Apple products are ignoring the default app that was on our phone, installed a separate app because it does something better because it's specifically built for that. There's no way.
So I have a Google search bar.
When I ride a motorcycle, I use Apple because the directions are on my watch. So when I drive a motorcycle, it'll vibrate and tell me when I have
to. That's a convenience thing. Yeah.
And it's convenience for me entirely because I have my Google search bar. It kind of keeps my search history, which is really helpful for me because earlier on, I'm going to map it on Google just to see what the time is going to be so I know when to leave, right? Let's be honest, I don't drive a lot. I stay home a lot. But so I want to understand what the time difference is going to be. And then later when I want to go, I don't have to re-find that address because it's in my Google search history bar. So it's kind of one click for me. If I want to stop at a gas station or a coffee shop, I can say find a long route. And I know Waze has some things like that, but I don't trust that Waze has everything on it. I believe that it only has sponsored things on it. Whether or not that belief is true is immaterial.
So that's another great point, though, right? For the same reason we have two parties on the political spectrum in this country, you can give people the same information, and different people are going to make completely different opinions of that information. Even though it's the same, their perception is going to be different. So that's another reason why I don't think either Expedia or Booking.com are going to crack this. And they describe it as a space race where winner takes all and someone's going to have a monopoly on everything.
If things like that were possible, then either Coke or Pepsi would have gone out of business a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
Like if people wanted to have only one choice, there'd be a lot of things that are different in the world.
I also use Waze when I know that I'm going to go to somebody's place because I can forward over my arrival time, which I think is a great thing with Waze.
Yeah, it is. Because it's a neat little utility, right? And that's what it comes down to. When you focus on one specific feature or function or solving one problem, you can have more innovation. Like when you try to be all things to all people, you're a jack of all trades and you're a master of none.
Now, do you advertise on Waze? Do you have any clients advertising on Waze?
Yeah, we've dabbled with it a little bit. I mean, mixed success depending on the scenario, but it's neat.
Yeah, it's certain clients. I mean, none of the New York properties I use because it's ridiculous. Nobody drives. But the other properties and locations, I put Waze on there.
I'm going to have to drop in just a second. I do too. At 1 o'clock today, and I have to powder my nose before my 1 o'clock call. One quick point, Stuart. If this wasn't clear, I also agree with you completely that this is not going to be winner take all, right? Okay. I think Lily said it perfectly in the Coke versus Pepsi analogy. There's going to be a Coke and there's going to be a Pepsi. They're trying to make sure, again, that they're not outrunning the bear. They're just outrunning the other guy.
They're not Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. But they're going to outrun in different ways, right? They're going to have a different value proposition. They're going to excel at different components within that.
I think that's right.
I think my issue isn't really with the fact it's happening. Maybe it's more with the article itself and how it defined it as a space race or an arms race.
It did seem over-dramatized. This was such a big thing that everybody's chasing I said, I didn't remember being such a big thing.
By the way,
I mean, even in the space race, 2 different countries made it interesting. I'm just saying, like
allegedly,
and there's the market leader, but
yeah. One last point, by the way, just on the whole Waze thing, just for a quick second. What is funny is I actually do use Google Maps when I drive if I'm staying relatively local. Because what is funny is I live in this kind of rural area. There's not a lot of people out here and the like, right? We have a fairly low population density. Waze is actually terrible here in the very local area because it doesn't get enough data.
Yeah.
Google Maps actually has better data locally. Once I get to one of the big freeways, then Waze is much better.
Yeah.
But
literally, when Waze first started, I was driving along the little dots where it was just a blank map, and as you drove, you literally were giving Waze the information from where you drove. I mean, that's how far back.
Anyway,
that's funny.
Mr. Tim, if people want to know more about you and where to find you, where do they go, sir?
TimPeter.com.
Thank you, Mr.
Tim.
And
I've got
a fantastic evening. We'll see you. I'll see you week after next.
All right. Yeah, we're gonna have Kat next week. Sorry we missed you, but happy Thanksgiving with the family.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye now.
Thanksgiving to both of you.
Mr. Stewart, I got to change your profile. I got to add in the wonderful distinction of CHDM.
Oh yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Got
yeah.
Put that down now.
I was really surprisingly nervous. That's the first test I've probably taken since college, and I went into that really not knowing. And I read through. I skimmed the 160 plus page prep thing, and I was like 80% of this is common sense. But how much are they? Knowing that Lauren was involved at some point, there's going to be questions in there that I was anticipating, and fortunately knew, but it was like, which of these was released by Google in 2017? Was it Penguin or Panda or Hummingbird or AMP pages? And so there was like a lot of that little, just you had to have specific knowledge of. It wasn't a common sense thing. But I just rolled the dice and said, I'll take it. And if I don't get it, I'll retake it. It's fine. And so,
but as I told you, there's a couple of questions that are flat out wrong.
All right. So let me ask you this, Lily. There's one question, and I don't remember the specific options, but I think it was adding a blog to your website is really good for, and it was A, search engine optimization, B, social media, C, paid advertising, or D, none of the above. So how would you answer that? Adding a blog to your website is great for what?
Well, my initial thought would be SEO. Right.
Mine too. No, it was social media. I'm like, well,
that's the wrong answer. It is SEO.
That is very debatable, isn't it? I mean, does a blog help you with social? Probably, because then you have content to distribute. But you can't say that it's more important for social than it is for SEO.
Is that the way that they're going after it for social, that they're saying then you can share your blog posts on social media?
Well, actually, to put the dots all together for, and I think this is where whoever created that question, which was not me, was going after, is that any paid strategy has to have an organic component of referral. An ad isn't the entire context of the offer. The ad is the big button you push to get to the content.
To get them to the content, yeah.
So if you're referring to an aspect or content of an event or a value proposition or a property explanation or offer, you always should have organic content that is connected to that ad campaign. Blogs are the fastest, easiest way of building them rather than building pages or orphan pages or anything. Blogs is the easiest way of doing it. But that's probably where they were trying to go for. But actually, social, same thing. Your social context doesn't necessarily hold the entire content of the dialogue. It's a referral to the content that's elsewhere, which is usually on your blog.
Yeah. So I don't say that to dog on the CHDM, because I think it's an amazing, accreditation. I think it does a good job for folks that are looking to make some moves in the industry and just have some authority. And HSMI in general is a great organization. I'm part of the marketing advisory board, and there's a subcommittee, a task force focused on the CHDM, which Holly is involved in. There's a number of others too, but they're reviewing all the material right now, and they continue to review all the actual questions. I think the new book comes out sometime in May this year. So it's always evolving, as we know this industry is. So I'm not saying that to point out the flaws in the system. I think everyone should still take the CHDM or whatever discipline you're in. You should take the HSMI certification. And before I go, I do want to plug as well the the marketing strategy conference that HSMI puts on is coming up in January. So I think everyone that's in this industry, anyone watching the show, should certainly take a look at that. The agenda is shaping up really nicely. They got some phenomenal speakers on that. So go check out.
Do you know when they're going to release that?
There was an email went out this past week that had some of the main speakers on it. And I think they're solidifying over the next couple of weeks. Certainly by the beginning of December, they should have the final, all the breakouts. And I know they've got 6 or 7 locked down and they're in negotiations with the others. So I would say early December, they'll have the full agenda ready to go. But from what I've seen from an inside perspective, it looks stronger than ever. So it's a really good one-day conference. In HSMI is trying to expand this a little more. It's beyond just the conference, because obviously the Adrian Awards and Gala is the day before it. And then they have a couple of breakout sessions. There's like a chief digital officer in a resorts roundtable session either way. So they're trying to really expand this beyond just the one-day conference. But even if you can just go to New York for the one day, just to the conference, it's amazing. You should definitely check it out.
The networking itself, this is one of those conferences where the networking value is the highest. It is probably the one conference in our industry that, and other focus right aside, if you're trying to hobnob with those kind of people, this is for the real doers, the rubber meets the road people, the ones that are facing it's a very great peer group to be talking about the revenue marketing symbiotic relationship. How do you facilitate this stuff? Not just talk the value, but actually the process of doing. It's a real good conference for that. Plus, also if you show up, you can go get a beer with Stuart and I. So
we'll both be there. I think Tim and Robert are both going to be there. I would assume sure Holly's going to be there. I know. So it's
I'm still waiting for my speaker invitation.
Actually, it's one that it's a little late probably too, because they're probably chasing them down, but it is always one to solicit participation in. It really is. I've steered away from having done it for so many years, where it's like I much rather I do the live coverage. We do the live coverage outside the room, so we pull people off the stage and debrief them from their presentations and stuff. And then there's been a couple of years now that I have not literally been able to actually attend the conference by watching it. I've lived it by taking them off stage and hearing about it afterwards, and not even being in the room. So I don't get to be that geek in the front asking questions like I used to as much. So.
You're always that geek in the front of the room.
That's true too. Yeah.
I really have to run. I'm 5 minutes late to a meeting downstairs, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Check out fueltravel.com/podcast. You can do more of our ramblings. See you guys.
Yeah. Excellent podcast. Award-winning. Adrian.
Oh, yeah. Adrian award-winning podcast. Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast. See you guys. Bye.
All right. Bye, Stuart. Well, we have a little bit of time, but you still want to hit the Google. There was some great articles to it, but I think Google bears some conversation to it because it does affect a lot of what we've been talking about. How do we actually... pretty much the article, and I'll post it up. But the sense of the article is that everything passes through Google, OTAs, everything. Google is the wellspring where all of this stuff comes through and you have to play by their rules by the very fact that they are compressing where you actually get to show up now. And with mobile being the dominant internet, it is the internet now. Well over 56% of all traffic coming from, I think now the newest estimate is 61, but I didn't get that from Google. I got that actually from Banu's presentation. With that being the case, you have to get down to almost 8 screens before you get to organic results because of the helpfulness that Google has put in their ad, their monetization. And a lot of times you don't get down to the organic because Google's getting better at giving you the immediate visual information that you need. And I'm referring to the map that they're referring to, that when you see the map and you see the prices in the little balloons, you stop because it's answering 2 primary questions for you. Proximity to what you have to know you are going to, and relative price associated with it, period.
Right. To be honest, that's the only way that I pick hotels, unless for some odd reason, which doesn't happen in my travel life very often, other than maybe vacations, that I need to be at a specific point. Typically, I'm going to go to a conference. I'm going wherever. I don't even Google hotels. I Google the location of where I need to be, and then I do hotels nearby, and I look at proximity. And I don't just look at miles. I look at whether or not I have to cross a highway. Is this walkable? Am I going to Uber? Like, what am I going to do? How does this factor into the total price of my trip? So all of that comes into play for me because I can see the prices by distance. And at that point, I'm not super loyal to any particular hotel brand. No. So I'm going to stay at whatever hotel is most convenient to my location. And Google, I've tried to do it, honestly, on the Expedia map, and I find it difficult. So the Google map is much, much easier for me to use when I want to be close to something. And I'm curious what the average traveler does, because here's where a focus group of one becomes a problem. I'm going to pick my hotel, and then I'm going to click that handy little website button. I don't even look at the offers unless they're a lot higher than what I want it to be. Then I might check and see if they're at a parity somewhere and if they'll match it. But as a revenue manager, I'm always going to go book direct. Unless they really give me a reason not to.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, and this is where we talked about that unicorn thing of being better at it. Right now, the default is current dates.
Right.
And you know that you're not, well, not just say knowing, it's very rare that you're looking at it literally because you have to go tomorrow. Okay. You're usually looking at it in lead times. Or you like to refer booking windows, and so because of that, Google, being Gmail and so forth, is going to get smarter, as they already have slowly become on other things, that they're going to know why you're looking in that location and are going to assumptively take the dates from what they think you're looking for, like a conference agenda or whatever, and they're going to insert them in. And they might even get better as to the map locations and anything related to offers associated with the conference or whatever. They might bring all that in too eventually. But, right now...
That would be hard, though, I think, if I'm just Googling an address. Or the convention center, how would they know which convention I'm going to?
Again, it goes back to whether you have an email. If you use Gmail, and if that data is in there, because already now you have the ability. I mean, you can take any of your hotels, and if you have a membership or loyalty reward program, you can actually connect your confirmation of your reservation in Gmail. You can actually connect the fact that Gmail, when you send an email to your guests into their Gmail account, that they only have to click a button to confirm the reservation.
Well, it's an unpopular opinion, but I really hate Gmail, so I will never be able to take care
of it. It goes back to this, which is this way, which is that way kind of thing. I went into the whole Gmail boat because of G Suite for Business. I just Gmail's it, and so I'm all Google. I don't even use my iPhone mail app for mail. I use my Google icon to open up mail for, and that's its choice. I used to be, before I got into Apple, it was all Outlook. It was all Microsoft Outlook that I use. It's back in the day when there was Excel versus Lotus. I learned on Excel, so Lotus was always different. And I have to say that that's probably the reason why Excel lived and Lotus died, was that Microsoft was good to get it out as fast as it could, faster than Lotus. People buying Lotus, and Lotus got expensive, so people started using Excel. And people just got used to Excel better than Lotus. But Lotus has some really cool functions, that you wish Excel had. Eventually it did, but, anyway. But to that end, it depends on the platform of usability as to how much access to data that they have. Like I said, if you wanted to, you could connect to that. Your Gmail could be your process of confirmation for your flights. For your, airlines already do that. In my Gmail, I can confirm my flight via just email receipt. You say, "Yep, got it." Boom, and confirm the flight right from the email that gets sent to say you're able to check in. So those are there. But the G Squeeze thing, when it comes to showing up, this goes to the BERT conversation. And for those who may not know, BERT is a AI infusion into how Google looks at your content on your website. One interesting glimmer of happiness to this, which it may be temporary, is TripAdvisor, Expedia, all lost relevancy and ranking in search engine pages, search engine result pages, with BERT's introduction. Because they don't have depth of content. They have what's called shallow content. It's a lattice network of connectivities that they have content relevant to just about every location in the world, your hotels in particular and everything else, but they don't have depth of content associated with your hotel as much as you do. So in strange ways, their rankings associated with a lot of more specific relevant content pieces about hotels and destinations went down. And you go and you look at places and you see TripAdvisor, Expedia, Hotels.com, Booking.com. I mean, it's like that's that you have to get past that list of organics before you even get to your hotel, even though it's your hotel that I was looking for. So that's an interesting twist that Bert is looking like what Tim pointed out, Java. And, it understands your intent of the usage of the word in the context of your search. That it knows I'm looking for the actual island and not a cup of coffee because I was referring to hotels in Java. So that's one thing that it's happening with it. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really just interesting across the board. First of all, as much as it can be annoying from a web development standpoint, and of course that affects us too with our company websites, but we're constantly having to change things and pay to have developers change things. But I think that the quality is really improving because of the changes that Google is doing. And so as also a consumer of websites, I appreciate the fact that the content is more relevant or more timely, and that we're not still in the era where at the bottom of every page there was something that said keywords and then there were 50 words following that to get ranked on Google. Oftentimes I would do a search and the first whole page was completely irrelevant to my search. So from a consumer perspective, it's definitely consumer centric what they're doing, I think, from a Google's perspective. And that's a great thing. And it's up to us to meet the challenges. I guess I lean more towards that side than the inconvenience of having to change anything with my website, because I probably use it more of the time as a consumer. And I can redesign my website. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's actually a lesson to be learned for everyone. Is that, and I have this from a client relationship on a persistent basis. I have a website. We're good. No, you have a platform that is in ever flux,
Right.
and then trying to describe to them the need for persistent content improvement, refinement, and changes. You need to actually, and this isn't just to generate revenue from a consulting point of view or an agency point of view or whatever. Your website needs to flex with where and when and what business it's doing. It's no longer a central gateway, one doorway entrance in your homepage and then goes from there. Every page in your website is an entry point now based on the content relevance of that page. And so every page has to have some symbiance as to what you are in total context, in addition to the specific content that drove the traffic there to begin with. And it goes as something as simple as the seasons change, so should your graphics, so should your context, so should be what you're talking about, in content development and so forth. And you just can't rely on the fact that because you talked about fall last year, as well as that page may have been indexed and found, that you're going to get that same traffic relevance because somebody else generated content and relevance about the same topic and you're not it. And so you've lost traffic, and it changes. Just because you ranked well on this one word doesn't mean you keep it. The next day, you might not even show up in the top 10. If you do
You have to know what everybody else is doing. You have to know what everybody else is doing too.
Yes.
Right?
You need to know who you're competing with. Yeah. And it's not
exactly.
necessarily the hotel across the street. It's literally, it could be another destination that's, I think I've told this story before too, is that I had hotels in Key West that I was constantly in competition with Vail, Colorado. And they're completely disparagingly different. And that's the point. Biffy and Buffy were trying to decide whether they wanted beach or slopes. And so, they were constantly trying to go for the same demographics I was going for. And so they were looking at, what choices they were trying to make for it. So understanding that, knowing who you're competing with in that market, you could steal some of their interest over to your side as well, because they were trying to steal yours. So it is a constant, you just don't tie I always say when you're driving a car, you just don't tie the steering wheel off no matter how straight the road. And that's what your website is. You constantly have to make minor corrections over things and make minor changes over time so that it stays exactly where you want it to be. So,
yeah, exactly.
Now that we've solved the universal word problems for that, there's a whole mess of articles we didn't get to touch that we could just probably shotgun through some of the ones because they were fun enough. We'll just go from the top what we didn't do. The first one was Marriott plans to inject color into beige Sheratons. It won't be easy.
They're redesigning Sheraton again?
Huh?
They're redesigning Sheraton again?
They're trying to make sure that the corpse stays somehow alive. I think they're trying to make a zombie walk, but that's just me.
I think
but they have too many of them.
The time in 10 years between Starwood and Marriott that Sheraton has gotten a brand redesign.
Well, there's so many of them. It was the default brand that if you couldn't qualify for the others, we made you a 4 points.
Right.
I mean,
but it's funny because they just went from, they had the kind of like cherry wood look, right? Then they changed to everything has to be navy blue, and they made everybody change all their collateral, change their lobbies, change everything. Now they're going to be doing that again. If I were an owner of a Sheraton, I'd be pissed. Like you're killing my capex just to change your brand. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, I can only imagine that there's a lot of frustration and that this could alienate some Sheraton owners. I agree that it needs to be done. I just feel badly for owners who've already gone through a couple of reiterations of Sheraton that are now going to have to reinvest all over again.
Yeah. Well, and also too, there's always brand saturation issues already, and Sheraton isn't the poster child of prioritization for the brand that owns them. And so you're sitting in a market that you were used to be competitors for the hotel across the street, aka Marriott, whatever, and now you're frenemies. And now you have to share data and share because obviously as a branded hotel, it's not your data, it's the brand's data. And, at some point, as you said, the owners have to sit and go, you know what? I think if I just take the flag off and go with whatever look I think is best for my market and invest that where I'm not being told persistently, my brand value proposition contribution is not there anymore. It's just not there. So rather than this brand saturation issue that I'm fighting, let me be myself in my own market. And I get to go over and point out that I am, in fact, the closer hotel to the airport, rather than having to give that duty to a brand that is in preference to mine, on and on and on. So, yeah, I think there's to your point, there's going to be a lot of brand owners that are going to say, yeah, I'm tossing in the towel. We're not going to do this anymore. And I know of a lot of ownerships that are deflagging, not necessarily Sheraton's per se, but in general, deflagging.
And if anybody needs to know whether or not that's a profitable move for them, they can reach us at tcrmservices.com.
That's right. All right. To your earlier point, Barack Obama says he likes Hampton Inn. I love the point that he made. It's like, hey, I love the presidential suites, don't get me wrong, but I don't like taking 15 minutes to shut off all the hidden light switches. Sometimes just having the bed in the one location, the bathroom in the other, and the door in the other is all good. And I have to say that sometimes simplicity and straightforwardness, it depends on the type of travel, obviously. If I'm doing it for recreational purposes, I think I like the poshness. But if I'm doing it for business, it's a function. I just need to be somewhere. And I want the room to be functional. I want it to clean. I don't want the little sanitized reminder.
Yeah.
I just want it clean. We all do our rituals when we go into hotel rooms of what we wipe down and what we check out to make sure that before we go to bed that there's nothing else in there and stuff. But yeah, I think it was a great point that he made that, hey, sometimes simplicity wins. Let's see, booking, holdings, experience. We talked about that one. Hospitality stays, race the bottom, got that one. We didn't really hit too much on the subscription scheme. And since I have you, how do you feel about the membership thing? Like, hey, we can do all this stuff, but hey, if you sign up with us in a membership capacity, a paid for membership capacity, not just a sign up to sign up, but if you pay a little extra now, we can really reward you with exclusivities in the future, including some sort of value proposition first trip.
I think that this is great to get around to parity issues, because if they're paying for a membership, then it no longer is apples to apples. So this is something that I've always told hotel owners, if you're dealing with a site that offers a subscription, which this is not the first, Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Smith Hotels has been out there for a long time offering a paid subscription. Mm-hmm. And the value to that is that then you can offer something that's maybe not in parity if you wish to. Another really interesting one that just came up with one of my clients is Inspirato. Have you heard of that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So paying basically a monthly fee, and then you never pay the hotel rate. They take care of that for you, from what I understand. So there's a couple different ways you could go about it. But the subscription model is really interesting to me, and I'm curious to see if more people will go for it, or if it will come back to this consumer choice idea, where then they feel limited to only hotels that are displaying. Like Smith Hotels is very choosy about what hotels they bring in, which kudos to them. It's luxury. They
virtuoso and things like that.
They inspect the hotel, so that's great. But also, if I want to stay at a Holiday Inn Express that's close to the airport real quick so that I can get on a 6 a.m. flight, that option's not available to me within the subscription. So you kind of have to do a value analysis for yourself as a traveler to say, am I comfortable being limited to whatever's within this subscription, and does that pan out for me? I mean, heck, I even do that with Sam's Club. You know, is the cost of this membership not only going to pay for itself, but also give me the benefit that I now have to shop at more than one store?
Right. And the same thing of Costco and so forth, where you know you make the money back that you paid to be a member, but you also made more money. I mean, the rent-a-cars with Costco. I only rent cars from Costco now. Hands down, the cheapest place I ever can rent a car from. But to your point, the tough part is the exclusion aspect of it, and I'm trying to figure out how a single hotel can play this. Destination, obviously, I think you have to have enough of amenity base to make a value proposition. You can't be a limited service or just a restricted service property, unless you are so well positioned in your market. You're so close to the conference center or the airport or something that you are the default value proposition of staying there because it is the convenience factor of exactly what you're there for.
Right.
I think that it would have to have that kind of criteria base to it. But to your point, I always thought that, you know, when you go into these free memberships, you get what you pay for. And a bottle of water after me being in your hotel for 30 nights is not exactly a really great reward. And always it's patterned, and we call it a frequency program, not a loyalty program, because it's patterned after you have to stay beyond the normal frequency to get the real value propositions. And so it's never quite attainable. Airlines are the magic at that. You know, the mileage necessary to get to your next level is always past a usual business travel person's norm, where you either want to pay the money to get the upper grade or you want to take a frivolous travel flight to make sure that you can hit that mark. And nowadays it's like, no, I'll just use your credit card and I get almost the same benefits, and just go that route. So, I think membership, it has a value. To your point, from a rate strategy point of view, it's an excellent tool at that point for non-parity. I mean, then you can really create a value proposition for somebody that goes beyond just their frequency value. So, I think it's a good one for that. Let's see. The Google schools. We talked about JD Power, travel industry apps. Apps and websites lag behind our industries. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. It's like, duh. Yeah, we know that we're slow about our travel. You know, people have better apps than the travel industry. We knew that. Again, group business, C-event, projects challenging U.S. group business market. We've had this discussion, but I don't think we've had it with you. You know, like I said, I have clients in New York. New York international travel is down by almost 44%. Whether it's the perception of the U.S. economy or the perception of who runs it, whatever, international travel is down. You know, the fact that, international travelers have to be fingerprinted and pictured is annoying. I mean, in reverse, when I've traveled abroad, I always thought it was like, what? You want my picture and what? So just picture that in reverse when people show up in the United States and they got to get their picture and fingerprints and all this stuff. You feel like a criminal just walking into the country.
Right.
So, international travel is down. Group business, we do more of this online now for most of the mainstream dialogues of stuff. I know firsthand from sponsoring and promoting HSMI conferences and so forth that a lot of companies are not funding conference attendance. They're relying upon their third-party vendors to educate and inform them, which I think is a dangerous thing to do because it's a biased opinion at best. So what do you think? Do you see this as a perpetual continuation, or this just as a current circumstance and situation?
Gosh, it's so hard to say for sure on that. It's just, it could go either way, but I think, I see a lot of different opinions on group business right now. I've actually seen recently a lot of articles where it said that group business was forecasted to be up, and now there's one saying it's forecasted to be down. I would liken that to, is the cholesterol in eggs bad for you or good for you? There's probably an article.
Which year you're asking, right? Exactly. The year that they said it was bad, or the year they said it was good for you.
Yeah. So, we've been making a concerted effort to reach out to all of our clients in this quarter and talk to them about what they're seeing for 2020 so that we can best position, what we need to do to help them win in profitability in 2020. So one thing that really stood out to me was just the comment that it really just matters where you're starting from. And I think that that's going to be true no matter the case. I mean, if you've had an average group outlook and you have recently added a ton of group sellers, and you're really hitting it with prospecting, then you may have a different result than the hotel down the street. You may be stealing share. I will say that the latest CVB forecasts that I've seen, most of them are projecting higher convention group business for 2020. So unless those actually pull backwards like they did in 2009, and I don't think we're there right now, then I think that there's a lot of places where group business is actually up. So given that this is coming from CVent specifically, I would assume that it's actually both more broad and less broad, right? So you've got your convention center groups, you've got your CVent groups, and you've got your direct groups. And I think all three of them maybe are performing differently, hence the confusion in some of these group forecasts.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think in previous discussions with the rest of the gang that we point out that there's a regionality to that interpretation as well. There are some markets, Nashville, oh heck no, that group business is blown out of the water. That's, what they're doing is massive. They've turned into a major powerhouse when it comes to group business. Up in the likes of Chicago, Orlando, and Las Vegas even. I mean, they're just blowing up. They don't have the full spectrum of the square footage for conference usabilities and so forth, but they are definitely as equal caliber to Minneapolis or some places like that in the sense of anchor points. I mean, every time I go to Nashville, the skyline's different. There's 16 cranes in the air at any time building up high-rise buildings. Those areas in Nashville that you wouldn't walk to at night that are now, metrosexual little suburbs. It's like, how'd that happen? When that happened? It's crazy the change in the city. So there is a regionality to that. To that end, no strange thing here. Smith Travel downgrades his RevPAR growth projections. They do it every year at the later end. So does everybody else. It's nothing against them personally. They keep their stockholders happy at the beginning of the year, and then they give them a little bit of reality by the end of the year. Okay.
Hotels do that to owners all the time too.
Yeah, right.
All the time.
So on this one of the couple of the last ones here, Accor Hotels a subsidiary leaks a terabyte of data. I have a question for you, and I was going to ask the other gang, and I didn't get to this. When you check into the hotel and you have to show your ID and so forth, and oftentimes or not, they make a copy of it. Do you ever ask for that copy back?
No. But I usually find that they aren't making copies anymore. I heard a rumor that it's actually no longer legal to make copies of IDs, but I'm not sure how accurate that is. But typically, they don't need a copy of the ID. The only time I usually still see that in use is if the guest is paying cash.
Yeah. I don't know about the legalities. I agree with you. I don't know if by state if there's the legalities associated with it. But I have always made it a point, and this is for my wife's persistence, that you get the copy back. Just, okay, hey, if you know that they've made a copy, or if there was a possibility of copy, you at least ask them, did you make a copy of my ID? Oh, yeah, it's on file. Yeah, I know. I mean, you don't need that any longer. I proved who I was. We've completed the transaction. I've paid. I want my ID back, basically. And just little things like that, because you look at there's nobody that's completely safe from being hacked. There isn't. Right. And this data, I mean, Macy's just talked about the fact that there were a lot of payment data that was stolen from them too. So, if you shop at Macy's, it's like, great, now another one to worry about.
I will say, though, that not many people are saying that their paper copy of their ID was stolen out of the dumpster.
No, but I will tell you a story of what I used to do. As a food and beverage director at a hotel in Houston, there was a new hotel that was built right behind us. Our loading docks faced it. And all of my group business, my food and group business, just started drying up because everybody wanted to try the new kid in town. Okay? So I'm out back in the dock with my team, and they were smoking, and I'm looking over, and I see across the street them dumping papers into their bin. So I walk over after the person walked away, and I looked in and picked up the paper, and it's BEOs, banquet event orders. And he goes, banquet event orders is full contact information, everything else like this. I'm like, So I noticed there was a lot of my previous clients on there and so forth and so on. So I just grabbed what I could, most all of it, and went in and started calling them. But this goes back a few years. And hey, Mr. Smith, I noticed that this is Lauren at the hotel, blah, 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 that you were across the street at the hotel, and you had a wonderful chicken dinner, so forth and so on. I said, I'd love to have you back. I can do it for $2 less a head because I had the price. This went on for a while. until I got a call from
them out. Did this freak them out?
No, I was very courteous about it. They, someone would ask, well, how do you know that? So, we saw you guys walking in, we're right across the street. We can't miss it, and it flattered them that we would actually remember who they are, which we, So my GM called me up after doing this for a few weeks. He says, Lauren, are you taking BEOs out of the blah, blah, blah's dumpster? Well, not anymore, I guess. All's fair in love and business. It's like, hey, you know what? If you're not shredding, and that goes back to a little bit of what I say, is like, we had a news thing down here, I guess some sort of doctor's office, something or other, or somebody maliciously, whatever, dumped a whole file cabinet of medical records on the side of the road, just papers everywhere. And this was, medical records, the histories and all this other stuff that just got thrown out. And it was a big deal because it's like nobody was cleaning up, no one was taking responsibility for it. There was no record of where it came from or anything like that. But that kind of stuff, how well do you know that hotel, once they're done with your copy, should they have made one, just didn't throw it into the dumpster, and somebody came along and go, oh, look, IDs, I wouldn't use it for that purpose, but, that kind of stuff. So it's one of those things, just like, the idea that anything can be taken from anybody or there's a hack that's being done somewhere, it's just, you got to walk around like that.
Yeah.
Again, just to finish off on some of the articles, the Ambridge interstate merger was a very quick transition. I mean, 4 months is pretty remarkable for companies of that scale to have blended so fastly. But when you read the article, it really didn't blend.
No. They're still in the process of blending. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
I have some insider data. I can't share all of it, but I will say that the merger in terms of resources and things like that is very much still ongoing. So perhaps they merge their financials or something along those lines, but for sure they're still deciding, what the best setup is and all of that. I did notice that Davidson's new COO came from Interstate, so it's interesting. That was just announced very, very recently. So I think that we're going to see maybe a little bit more of that, because just like when Two Roads merged, and then even more so when Hyatt acquired Two Roads, there's just, they might not need everybody. And so I think there's some people jumping ship, others will be politely escorted. I think both, the companies are both really great. I've always felt that they dealt really ethically from everything that I've seen. So my hope is that they're taking good care of their people in the process of the merger, and it's still good to see that they're moving so quickly. I will say also that it was probably very quick because there's likely no change to systems here. It's not like a Marriott Starwood merger where we're talking about massive technological changes to PMS, CRS, RMS systems. So, they're already on brand systems. They're just a management company. They're not rolling out their own proprietary systems with the exception of maybe finance. So that definitely makes the merger a lot faster.
Sure. I mean, right now, the reporting system is probably their biggest beast to tackle, as to who gets what information and what collaboration and so forth. But yeah, to your point, I did a presentation not too long ago on how to survive a merger. And unfortunately, the best recommendation I could give as advice to most people was be loud, because it's the quiet ones that get left behind. When it comes to, you can have advocates for you that say, oh, Lauren did a great job. He's been always great in the XYZ position. But the other side, your mirror of who, and it also depends on who's taking over whom in this world, who bought whom, okay, as to who gets preference to who gets to choose. But sometimes just the other person being louder or more vocal or more engaged or whatever. And that goes from reaching out immediately across the aisle to the other side saying, hey, I'm Lauren. I do this and this and this with them. I'm looking forward to looking with you guys. Which one of you guys does what? So I'll be talking to you. And you just literally step in and do the assumptive of, hey, I'm doing this, and so now that we're doing this together, I'm going to be doing this with you. I'm not trying to squish the other person, but the louder person tends to get the squeaky wheel, gets the attention kind of thing. And so when people are sitting down looking at lists going, Lauren really took an initiative, and he reached across, and I like working with him. And I mean, I like, my person, but, Lauren seems to be the person that really is taking this on, so let's keep going, and the other person goes bye-bye.
And make sure your results are apparent as well.
Yes.
Conversation, so that it's not just who do you like, but also, make sure that you're quietly making sure that they have access to key things that you've done that had moved your company forward. so that you can select the best results too.
Yeah. And one of the strongest ways of doing that is answer questions quickly. Don't try to be elusive. Don't try to be, like, hey, I'm open table. Here we're to help. We're one team. The more you.
I did a study on that about a year ago, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great way, in being able to promote other things that you've done in the past that maybe aren't even relevant right now. But, back then it was this, but the most recent data tells me this. Conversations like that immediately bring people to your side because they can know exactly what's going on and that you have a grasp on it. And if you don't, if you have no clue what you're doing and you haven't made any contributions to your company in the last 2 years, you should probably start job searching.
Yeah, you should be like, I'm going to be the one that gets taken away and given the little brown box saying thanks for your service. But yeah, it's very much that. And also, too, being complimentary in the sense of those people that are coming into the team, whether you're the one that was bought or the one that is buying. But if you're that person that says, now that we have you as this resource, now that we can do this, or I can give you this as something that can augment yours, you start showing connect the dots, and people are like, wow, this person immediately is looking at it from the bigger picture. They're already looking at it from the way we have to look at it. Compared to
the culture is a fit. Some people may choose to leave just because the merged culture is going in a direction that they don't personally believe in. And I really applaud the people who leave for that reason. Not because it's anything antagonistic, but because they have a strong sense of what their personal values are. And they know whether or not they align with the brand. And if they don't, then find a brand that they do align with. There's all sorts of value systems out there with brands. And you have to believe in what you're doing. So if you don't, and you're just struggling to hold on to a job, just keep in mind there's a lot of open positions out there right now in hospitality. With this growth in supply, a lot of positions are in short supply. So I think that everybody's going to be pretty much fine as long as they're being proactive and looking ahead for whichever path it is that they prefer to stay on.
And to your point, with the idea that it's not a cultural fit for you, you have a wonderful reason of why you're looking.
Right.
The stigma of being removed because of merger, or the stigma of looking for a new job. Here you get to say, look, these companies came together, and it wasn't it was just the blending was not of a culture that I was enjoying, and I'm looking for the culture that fits for me. I thrive and excel in a culture that I feel committed to, and that was not a culture that I saw in the direction that I wanted. And people can understand that, and they appreciate that you're looking at them as if it's their culture that you're looking for. So it helps in a lot of ways. The last comment was the rut row. We'll finish the rut row. The Sinners Hotel. I guess, Robert put this in, don't know why. Well, actually, I sense that, I'll put the article up real quick. So this hotel is trying to be this discreet boudoir kind of thing, and why not Paris, right?
I missed the word discreet in there. Was that in there somewhere?
No, I don't think so. I think I just kind of put it in there by the way they were describing the decorum. But they fail in the service profile. I mean, the people seem happy to help, but the actual infrastructure of the hotel, the amenities are not diverse enough or big enough, or there's functionality issues that are problems. So I guess the telltale tale of this is, if you're going to try to first garner attention by calling yourself the Sinner Hotel, that you should have all the accoutrements associated with making it a successful concept and not miss the mark on some probably fundamental things like the do not disturb button not working on a room.
Yeah, that's a problem for this hotel.
Yeah, the spa only holding 2 people, but it's a hotel that has more than 2 people in it. So, if you're going to use the spa for spying, I think you don't want to share with 50 other people or have 52 of them, whatever. But yeah, so I guess from a concept point of view, if you're going to put a concept or a theme to what you're doing, work through the details first and make sure that they're all in place before you open up and have somebody point out the fact that you're not quite what you think you are.
Yeah, this goes to literally everybody. I think there's a lot of people out there who just kind of, oh, this sounds great, let's just do it. And they just don't take the time to think through all of the details. And so I think that's problematic across the board. They just happen to be a little bit more straightforward. But what's interesting to me about it is the unabashed concept that they have behind this, that's really catering to a subculture that, whether or not we want to talk about it, is out there. And I guarantee that half the people who don't want to talk about it wish they could be part of it, to be completely honest.
Yep.
So I think that it's really interesting that they're going this route. I think they have to be even more careful with data. I go back several years to the whole Ashley Madison thing that broke, where, it's really a site for affairs. And then when they got their data leaked, that was a whole different kind of problem.
That was a whole mess.
I think, a hotel like this is kind of looking at a similar thing. People don't want to admit to their proclivities in public. And so I'm really curious, since they're making this so public, that whether or not there will be any hotels that follow suit on similar concepts, or, will the concept spread at all, or not really?
I don't know. You have your historical back in the roadside hotel days, the honeymoon suites. You know, this kind of thing. I know from a client I had in Australia for a long time, QT Hotels with Ridges. They had this really lead edge nouveau feel. They had these beautiful women that were bellmen, basically called Mavens of Mayhem or something. They nicknamed them, and wearing these provocative things. But they were huffing the luggage. I mean, they were bringing the luggage over. That was a position. They did great at the job, but their whole upside down bicycles on the ceiling things and odd things there in the rooms and sheepskins in the rooms. Seriously, but that's an Australian thing. But and the one cool part that was in the hotel was if you were in the elevator by yourself, they would put a sensor in the elevator, and so the song that was playing was "One is the loneliest number." If it was two or something, it's like there was other songs depending on how many people were in the elevator. So it had really cool little things like that. I don't think they went the whole naughty, as in Paris kind of thing, but they certainly were of that provocateur thing. That this is cutting edge nouveau. You got to be chic to be here mentality. Right. And then there's a lot of hotels out there. I think there's possibilities of it being, niched like that, depending upon how much density to market you have. I mean, this is a hotel of one, that's doing this in Paris. But when you mentally put Paris and romance, and mentally it all goes together. So it seems a good place to start. Which doesn't bode well for New York, I guess. But oh well. I have kept you here a really long time. Thank you. 2 hours and 15 minutes. But I really did. I really enjoyed Robert's list this week. He really put together a lot of good stuff. And the pleasure of having you from a revenue perspective is a lot of fun.
Thank you.
As you come into the conversation. So I always enjoy the fact that we can make sure that those conversations get brought up. Next week, we will have Katya Mohammed, or affectionately known as Kat. She's brilliant. She's the Director of Education for ALHOA, the Asian Association of Hotel Ownerships. I was just at their HX conference. Well, actually, it's not their HX. They merged in sponsorship with the HX conference, which is the Hotel Experience Conference in New York, which is tied to the Designers Conference, which was amazing. Huge place, 67,000 people attended, kind of thing.
Wow.
But she's the director of their education, and she picked this date. I told her, pick a date, and she says, "Well, I'll do the one right after Thanksgiving." And I know it's hard for get other hosts on this because it's a holiday, but she is bringing a great topic, and I'm told her automatically she has to come back again. You can't just let this go once, and this is human trafficking. And I'm not saying this from a we're going to talk about our industry has never truly been educated in how it contributes to human trafficking. And so we need to train our teams to identify what human trafficking is going through their doors. And it's going through our hotel doors. There's no hotels that can say, oh, no, that's not a problem for us. Any hotel can be an unwilling participant in human trafficking. You do not know. You do not know who was left in the car while the person checks in. You do not know that quiet person standing beside the person that's checking in. You do not know who was let in after the person checked in, or the fact that they brought somebody in outside by website or something. You do not know. Now, high security hotels maybe have a better chance, but we contribute to this terrible crisis as an industry, unwillingly. So she has developed an education program for ALHOA. She went through a certification program with an organization that has identified this and is out to train people in industries to identify human trafficking to stop it. So I think it's a really excellent topic. And I give her as any time when you came, any guest, as much time as I want to talk about. But I think it's an incredibly valuable topic to bring in. And I told her, regardless of how much we get covered in this show next week, she's got to come back another week so we can all participate in that conversation again too. So, So I think you mentioned that you're not going to be able to make it. I didn't know.
Oh no, I'll be there.
Oh, you will? Oh, awesome. Holly mentioned
it might be like this. It might just be the two of us from what I'm hearing, but
I'm okay. Yeah, Holly said she's going to try to make it as well.
Okay, great.
And so that'll be something. And I haven't heard from Stephanie yet.
It would be an interesting change if it was all women.
You know what? And now I will be happy to blank my screen on if I have to, or be the token man in this conversation. But I think I can't overemphasize the need for this topic in this conversation. Absolutely. I truly think it's value. So with that said, for anybody that wants to know more about you and what is it that you do, where can they find you and what is it that you do so that they know?
Sure. So I'm the CEO of Total Customized Revenue Management and a founding partner of ThinkUp Enterprises, which you can Google to read more about in Hotel Management Magazine. And we do revenue management services for the industry. On the TCRM side, we do task force or long-term engagements where we're handling the day-to-day revenue management. And ThinkUp Enterprises is our newly branded consulting arm, in which we're focusing in on the important topics of assessing your sales, marketing, and revenue management efforts within your hotel to improve your profitability and create sustainable legacies for your company.
That's a lot. For those who saw earlier in the show, we had Tim Peter from Tim Peter Associates. We had Stuart Butler from Fuel Travel. We had Robert Cole with Rock Cheetah. Who we didn't have was Holly Zoba from Influencer Sales. She's a regular. Stephanie Smith with Cogwheel Marketing. Did I miss anybody? Dan Waxman with Cecido. Valerie Perrin with Nor One. These are other co-hosts that we have that come in and out with us all, which always gives us great diversity. For this show and all previous 223 other shows, you can go to for now. You can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. By the end of this month, I think we'll be finally able to put the new website up. I'm right now, the domain I'm thinking of using is hospitalityliveshow.com. I don't know if I'm really hooked on that yet. If you talk to, Edward Sanders with Flip2 is another co-host that didn't make it today for us, but is a regular for us. Everyone's into this brevity of domain names, and I've never been a subscriber of that. I've always felt you should be what you are. It helps with the process of knowing what the website for. I say that from experience of being a partner in an old agency called Standing Dog. It's like, what was that? You were drunk one night and you came up with a name, which literally actually probably happened. To me, the relevancy of the domain name, and now with BERT and things like this going into the context of what the words mean, I think it actually helps in the process if your domain is related to what the content is as well. But so right now it's hospitalityliveshow.com is what I'm thinking is going to be. It might be something different, but we'll see. But we'll also be on a new platform which will allow for 10 talking heads in December. So that'll give us a little bit more flexibility with having even more people interrupt each other and talk over each other. I might start using the mute button on some just Robert click, me click. Anyways, so for everyone that watched this, we were simulcasting today on 4 different LinkedIns, 4 different Facebooks, 2 different YouTubes, and 1 Twitter. So hopefully for those that watch this through any of those, this show will also be recasted next week for EU, the European Union, London time at 11:30 on Wednesday, and APAC Sydney time, 11:30 Sydney, Melbourne time. So with that, thank you very much, Liv, for all of your time today and your contribution to the conversation. And for everyone, thank you so much. And we will see you all next week, 11:30 Eastern, when we have Kat Mohammed talk a lot about education that Aho is doing. Till then, bye, everybody.